for the few people in attendance and the dozens who are listening all around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, from his spare bedroom in Norfolk, England, Mark Laws asks you to get ready to Thank Fucking Monday!
Jamie, welcome to the TFIM show.
Morning. How are you, mate?
Mate, I'm very good. And I'm pleased to have you on. The exciting thing about having you on is that, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think you are an avid listener. You've been far too busy working and doing adult stuff over the last few months to be wasting hours listening to me chat nonsense with people. So you don't know what to expect.
No, well, that's not true completely, because I used to read all of the Thank Fuck It's Monday posts, so I'm aware of the approach that you have to life, if you like, and that's what when you said would I consider doing this, I was like, oh man, I'd love to, because the frank nature and the candid nature of the approach is right up my street. So I'm looking forward to just chewing the fat with you over the next hour or so.
Cool, perfect. So yeah, I forget about the blog, like, and I forget how many people used to read the blog, and the amount of people. And I say this, I'm no celebrity by any stretch of the imagination, but literally anywhere I ever used to teach in the world, somebody would mention Thank Fuck It's Monday, and it'd be people I'd never heard of. I was like, well, if you read it, fucking like it or comment on it, because I sit there writing it every bloody week, and I don't know that people are reading it.
Mate, the thing about it for me, I was as impressed with the fact that you could continue to do that every Monday as I was of the content, because I was thinking to myself, take some doing this, like you know, to have something interesting for people to read every Monday. So I was as impressed about that more than anything. It was cool.
Yeah, for 4 years I did every single so it was 208 Mondays consecutively without missing one, and then I only stopped them because I think Molly was a couple of months old, and I was starting to when my Sundays were my own, I would sit, and my whole Sunday, sometimes 6-8 hours, I would sit and I would write it and I'd work on it. Then obviously when children come along, things change, and I'd got to a point where I was about I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks away from exactly 4 years, and for no reason whatsoever, I was like, well, I can't stop now. So if I'll do 208, and I've done my exactly 4 years. And then I think about 3 or 4 weeks later, something happened. I did like an extra one, and then COVID hit, and then the whole thing derailed. But for years, I had people, very high profile sort of business gurus who would be saying, mate, you need to make this a podcast. Okay, I will. I will. And I'm so useless, I didn't. And then 5-6 years later, here I am. So you're an avid Thank Fuck It's Monday fan, but haven't listened to any of the podcasts yet, but you can make up for that later. I'll let you off.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing is I was thinking, do you know what, I might do a bit of research and listen to some of the other ones, and then I thought, actually, I quite like the idea of going in quite blind for this one, and rather than be influenced by other people's journeys or how they took it. So I actually thought, do you know what, let's go in blind, and then see where we end up, man.
Yeah, see, this is why we're friends, because that's my attitude to most things. Like, the amount of time I've wasted preparing for things and worrying about what to do, like when something comes up, and I sort of like, now I've got, I don't know whether it's like a mix of confidence and stupidity that mean I can just sort of not prepare at all, or do a minimal amount, and just try to trust myself or back myself. But we'll find out, because if this is a complete shit show, then clearly my instincts aren't as good as I hope.
This is it, isn't it? So much, excuse me, I've got the Christmas lurgy, by the way, so if I do keep coughing, I apologize. Someone said to me when I was about 7-8 years into my first business, I was after a bit of counsel, and they turned around to me and said, Jamie, the best way I see that you approach business and typically life. And I was like, well, go on then, where's this going? You know, I was like, he basically said, and he used a golf analogy. And he said, it's like you're standing on the tee and you've got a shot over water. It's like 200 yards over water. And he said, and you've got two choices. You can hit it over the water and have a go at it, you know, or you can go round the water, but it'll take you 3 or 4 shots to get round to it. He says, and you'll always take the tough one, the tough hit over the water. That's how your disposition is that. And I was like, yeah, okay. I said, where's he going with this? I get that bit. He said, it's only when you got to the green that you realized it wasn't 200 yards, it was 250 yards. And I was like, that makes loads of sense to me. I know exactly what you mean, as in that, you know, my optimism of, it's all right, it'll be tough, but we'll be all right. And then when you get there, you look back and you go, fuck, that was so much harder than I anticipated, but I'm still standing. And because I chose that, blind ignorance has got me here somehow. And I was like, when he explained that, I took it 2 ways. One was, I can't lose that about me, but maybe I need to read the course booklet a bit more before I actually take the shot. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of
absolutely. I can confirm, as much of an anecdote as that was, in reality, I have stood in front of 200 yards of water with you with a giant stick in my hand, and I can confirm that you did go straight over and come out the other side. I think about 3 of my balls went in the fucking water. I nearly snapped my club, and then I had to dribble my ball around the lake like a hockey player.
We had a beer afterwards, and that's all that mattered.
Well, I don't know if you remember, we had more than a beer, because me and you were driving, and we were like, right, we'll be polite. We'll have a beer.
Yeah, that's right.
Probably we'll have one, right. Have a bit of food, and then we can drive home. Then another round came around. We're like, oh well, fuck it. Let's make a few phone calls.
Yeah.
This is look like it's going to be a good night, and we booked a hotel room, and I don't think either of us stayed in it.
I think that was the case.
I fell asleep in my car.
Correct. Randomly, I think, and just to confirm, I think I slept on the floor in one of the other lads' rooms for some random reason. No idea why. When I got, yeah. Hey, those were the days.
Those were the days. Yeah, last Christmas.
Yeah.
Longer ago than that. I think, what was that? Yeah. 4, 5, 6 years ago?
No, that is way longer than that.
Oh, really?
That was before I joined Ham. We're talking 7, 8 years ago.
Was it that long ago?
Yes, mate. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. We are getting old.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, happy days. Jamie, I'll start off the show with a little intro round, a little get to know you round. I'm going to ask you some questions. I want you to imagine that the end of the world is imminent, and I want to know what would be the last thing from each of these categories that you would want to experience.
Oh, okay.
Don't panic. End of the world isn't really coming. I'm glad we're informed. Oh, hang on. Yeah, we've got a bit of time.
Yeah, we're good.
Jamie, what would your last meal be?
Oh, it's easy that. As in a true fitness professional, it's a chippy tea.
Oh, perfect. So what honestly, are you having? Are you having peas? Do you have curry sauce?
No. It is, and I know. I've got this question nailed down because I asked this question to the people. Like, what's your death row meal? Is my question to the people. It is jumbo sausage, chips, beans, a pint of full fat milk, and thick white bread and butter. Bosh, that is my death row meal.
Nice.
In true fitness professional.
That's a lot of detail. That's more detail than I usually get, but you've missed off an important bit. Is your sausage battered or not?
And no, it's not.
No. A Savoy.
So not a Savoy, no, it's just a large sausage. I'm not interested in a Savoy. It's a bit funky, that, for me. No, it's a bit too, no. I'm at the end of the day, I'm a Rugeley boy at heart. Chippy tea, job done. Yeah.
But you want a proper sausage that has seen a bit of pork in its life, not the things that you get from the chip shop.
Yeah, so that's there you go, mate. Yeah.
That's a very good answer. Well, my question 2 is, what would your last drink be? But if you've already called a pint of full fat milk.
I honestly, if I had a choice, and I've said this, I'm almost addicted to it. So literally, it's and it makes people's stomach turn. I know it does, but when I was a kid, my mum took me to the doctors. I wasn't eating much, and he basically turned around and said, "What is he consuming?" And she said, "Well, he consumes a lot of milk." And he was like, "Right, that's your problem. Then you need to reduce." So I had to. He put me on a limited amount of milk per day as a child because I was drinking too much of it. So yeah, my final drink would definitely be that. And again, alcohol, I'm not interested in alcohol. I'm not one of these that drinks it and enjoys it. I do it because it's just a social, it's a good laugh. You know, you can forget about your worries of the day and have a drink. But I mean, yeah, I'm not a red wine connoisseur. I'm very much a working class kind of chips and kind of guy. And I've tried to get rid of that for years and years, and I realised I'm all right with it actually. So I'm actually fine with it.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm a little bit the same. I my entire 20s was a bit of a write-off for nights out, post rugby, drinking, like parties and stuff like that, and that was literally a decade of my life gone. Like great fun, but if I sit now and if I drink I bet like 2 bottles of Budweiser for £4. I better get them from the co-op on the way home, and I'll sit and drink one. I'll do nothing but burp for like the next few hours, or it makes me feel so uncomfortable. I have to sit in a certain way, and I'm like, I don't think I actually like this.
It's strange, isn't it?
Like it's so different to sitting in a room with a group of hundreds of people, and you can drink 10 of them. But then if you just sit on your own drinking a cold beer, I don't think it's actually that nice.
I've never done it. Well, I did it once, but maybe when we get into the podcast that'll come up. But that was due to some dark times. But typically, Monday to Friday, not interested. If I ever had a drink, it was because I'm sitting with the lads after a football. You know, and it's just one of those things where things become funnier when you've had 4 pints, right? It's not much more difficult than that. The problem is when you've had 8. And you can't remember getting home, you know, that's where the trouble starts. But I've always said that I've had some of the best times of my life under the influence of alcohol. I've also made some of the worst decisions of my life under the influence of alcohol.
Yeah, and luckily at least then you can't remember them.
No, well, that's it. It's just when everybody else tells you, right? You're like, oh God, the fear kicks in the next day. So, yeah.
Moving on to a little bit of culture. What would be the last movie you would watch?
Last movie. If it was the end of the world, would it influence what my top 3 are? Probably not. I think I'm going back to my number 1 film is Top Gun, the original. Just as like, I think it's because if I had my time again, I think I want to be a fighter pilot in my wildest dreams, but no, what a film. I mean,
mate, I think you're probably 1 school year above me. So I can guarantee that when you were about 8 or 9 years old, you got the Top Gun cassette soundtrack.
Oh yeah. Still got it. I've got it now, obviously digitally now, but Danger Zone. Some bangers on that. So yeah, I mean, close second is 300, the Spartan film. Love that film. If that film pops on and the opening credits start, then it's just I'm in. I'm watching it again. I mean, I know the story, but no, that they would be my top 2 most definitely.
What's third? Because you threatened me with a top 3.
Dumb and Dumber.
Oh mate, you can't beat it.
Do you know, it's got more nostalgic sort of connotations to it for me as well. When I played football at Telford, I used to go out with a mate of mine, and he's still my best mate. And and we go to the kebab house at 2:30 in the morning or whatever, and he'd do this to me every time. He'd suck me in. We get a pizza, and I'd stand outside the kebab house, and I'd go, go on then, I'd get it open, and he'd run off. And he used to live about 15 minutes from the kebab house, and he could run faster than me. So he just used to run off, and he used to shout down the road, "You'll enjoy it more when we get back home." And I used to have to chase him down the road back so I could get warm pizza. And then what we'd do is he used to do it every time. We'd sit there, we'd put Dumb and Dumber on, and we'd fall asleep watching Dumb and Dumber eating pizza on the kebab house. I mean, what else do you need in life, right? It was everything you need. So it's got more. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still think it's brilliant, but it just reminds me of those. I was 21 then. So
yeah, that film. Well, when I was at school, that I would watch that weekly, on a weekly basis. It was. I could probably still do most of the words if I was watching
right.
it. It's so funny, so funny.
Yeah.
Who would be the last band or musician that you would listen to or watch?
Yeah. No, I like music, but I'm not like a massive music person. I like all sorts of music. So it's, again, it would have to be something that would take me back to a real play, you know, like where because music does that, doesn't it? Music has this amazing ability. When you hear a track, it takes you back to a point of your past where you go, I can feel what I felt like at that point.
Yeah.
And it would be probably Wonderwall, because it was a time I was like 16 at a Sony Discman, and I remember I used to try and dress like Oasis, and I remember walking across the field around Christmas time. It was certainly dark and wintry, to my mate's house, and I had Wonderwall on repeat on my Sony Discman, and there's just something. I mean. And then it's tied in with I've seen Oasis live twice at the Millennium Stadium, and it made me understand what a front man really is when Liam Gallagher would stand at the front of the stage and do nothing, and there was just this unbelievable aura around the guy. And then there's these plastic cups are flying past his head, and he's just standing there, and then Noel would go into some kind of riff of one of their iconic songs, and I was just like, "Whoa!" And as I'm talking to you, it's almost like my hair in the back of my neck standing up. So it's probably that. I mean, it's probably that, because the best years of my kind of youth were between probably 16, 17 to 19, 20. That was probably my best years at that kind of those time. And then obviously my football career derailed when I was 21, and it all became a bit more difficult. So that, and I kind of. Oasis was sort of the soundtrack to those years, really. And in fact, I remember going and watching a tribute band called No Oasis. I remember, it was sort of back in those days. So yeah, it would be something like that, I think, right?
Yeah, mate, I can't argue with any of that. There's it's again, we're very similar age, so that I've got all the same memories, all the same goose pimples as you were talking about the association between listening to those songs. And I can picture myself in my sixth form common room and round my mates' houses, and when my first mate's driving and we're all in the car singing along, I can hear it and feel it now, 25 years on almost. Music's great. It does that.
It does that, doesn't it? And there's a few things that flipped up. I remember listening to Diana Ross in the back of my mum and dad's Metro, and we used to drive 1,000 miles to the south of France for our family holiday. The first time we did it in a mini Metro. And how's that even possible, right? There was four of us for 3 weeks in a Metro, and we drove 1,000 miles, no aircon, to the south of France. It took 2 days to get there, right? Yeah. And my mum had like Diana Ross, and what was the other one we used to listen to? Paul McCartney when he was in Wings. Right, not even Beatles songs, right? So it's funny how, so if I hear any of those pop up anymore now, I'm straight back, like falling out with my sister for 2 days in a sweaty Metro, trying to, it's just unbelievable, isn't it? Yeah, that's crazy, man.
What would be the last book that you would read?
Now, this is a tough one because I'm not an avid reader, but there have been some books that have stuck with me. I absolutely love Shoe Dog, the Nike story.
Oh, the Nike.
I mean, as I say, but I'm not an avid reader. I don't find it easy because as I'm reading, my mind often drifts into different things that's going on in my life. So I get frustrated because I'll read a page and I have to reread it because I wasn't actually taking it in, and I get frustrated by that. But that book was one where I would not do anything else and would continue to read it. It was dominated. I just loved that unbelievable story of persistence and how things fell into place eventually. And so that was fantastic. I think another book that I've lived by since it was given to me about 15 years ago is Eat That Frog. Now, it's not really a book you'd want to read as the end of the world was nigh, but if it was close by, because the reality is Eat That Frog is just all about taking the horriblest job of the day and tackling it first, and then everything else seems easy after that, rather than leaving your big horrible job to the end of the day, you know. So maybe not one you'd read it, but when I think about books that have stuck in my mind, I often will say to myself, eat that frog with my daily task list, or, you know, the things like that. So those would be two that spring to mind.
Cool. And what would be the last town or city that you would want to visit?
Oh, that's a tough one. Because everything you've asked so far, it's just, I get things that spring straight to my mind. Do you know what's really interesting? Something did spring to my mind, but I'm almost a bit embarrassed to say it, but I'm going to, because that's what sprung to mind. I used to sit, so I'd been on a lad's holiday in Magaluf. I mean, I can't believe I'm even saying this when you think about the places in the world you could spend. But actually,
and you're going back to BCNs at Magaluf.
Mate, honestly, but it was a quiet moment in the midst of all the mayhem, which is a lad's holiday. I used to sit on my balcony, and it was like the calm before the storm. So you knew you're going to go out, and all mayhem was going to, you know, it just was going to ensue. And I used to sit there, and I used to take with me a boombox. So I'm going back to 1999. So it had a CD in it, but it wasn't. There's none of this digital stuff. And I can't believe it. I used to take a boombox with me as part of my luggage, and the CD player. And I remember sitting on my own in this kind of calm moment as just before you get showered and changed to go into the chaos. And I had Redemption song by Bob Marley on. And it's interesting, actually, because that song is still a big song for me. I don't truly know why, but I sat there and I was just having this complete calm state going, I don't want to be anywhere else than here right now. This moment where everyone's just having loads of fun and with people who I really want to be with. We're going to have the time of our life tonight, and I'm, you know, it's just unadulterated fun. And I'm just having a minute to myself listening to this fantastic song that is just so, like, simple, and it's an iconic voice and his guitar, and I'm just having a minute, and that was just a complete moment of peace and euphoric kind of, I don't want to be anywhere else right now, which is ironic because I'm talking about being in Magaluf on a lad's holiday, but it wasn't. It was more than that to me. It was more than that. I think it was because at that point I was in the middle of my football stuff, and I was I was suffering mentally. I was scrambling a bit to try and hold my place in the professional football world, and to have that release where you're not under that pressure. I'm out of it all, and I can just let myself go with people that I love to be around. And there was more to it than that. And so I was able to just sit there, listen to this iconic song, and just have that complete moment of going, I don't want to be anywhere else right now. I just want to stay right in this moment, which is quite, so yeah, in context, it means a bit more than just a lad's holiday, you know. Yeah.
Mate, it's a good answer. I mean, most people go for San Francisco, Golden Gate Bridge, or the Grand Canyon, Sydney Opera House. I think that's the first and only time I'm going to get a Magaluf but it's the sentiment, isn't it? It's
what it means to me. It's like,
One thing that pops up in this podcast all the time, mostly because of my bias, and I just fucking shoehorn it in anywhere I can, is opposites and like opposing forces. And as you're talking there, I've been on a lad's holiday to Magaluf. I went in the summer of 2000, probably just the year after you, and I can understand that peaceful, tranquil calmness before the mayhem and the noise and just the complete fucking carnage, and just how those two opposing forces, like you need them both. You need to have a bit of both, and they complement each other rather than conflict against each other. And
the other thing about it for me was from the age of like 12, I was in a bit of a difficult place, and then that continued into my professional football career. And so for me, the pressure that I was under, and what was going on in my head compared to what people saw, were two completely different things. And so when I was on a lad's holiday, I could just laugh. Like, I could just laugh, and I had no parents to please. I had no peer group to worry about. I had no coaches to please. I had no panic or fear. I could literally just sit with great people in a place where no one really knew me. It didn't matter. And I could just sit there and actually finally just be myself and just enjoy myself. And I think that's what those times did for me. It took me out of quite a difficult headspace because of the environment and the people that I was with. And I could come out of that. And my friends that I go on idolise weren't my football mates. They were my mates from before all of that and stuff like that. So I was able to just be taken out of the chaos that my life was, and the struggles that I was having. And so that moment means way more than just a lad's holiday. You just went there just to, be a drunken hooligan. It wasn't that. It wasn't that for me. I
mean, and therein lies the beauty of the answer, that it doesn't matter that you're sitting on a 2-star shitty fucking hotel balcony that probably costs 20 quid a night for a 4 nights. Absolutely. It doesn't matter that you're in a pretty vile place that is it's about as low as they get, but that can still be the most magical place because of the context of my life. Sort of empowered you, and how it sort of allowed you to, I don't know, come out of your shell a bit, to be surrounded with the right type of people, and to get away from the troubles of life, as it were.
Yeah, and I remember it's not a surprise that when I had that moment where I said to myself and my parents, I don't want to be a footballer anymore, which was a big deal. I was 21. I had my second contract cancelled, and I was absolutely broken emotionally, mentally. I just had enough, and I'd been under pressure to be a footballer since I was kind of 8-9 years of age. I showed promise as a kid, and it was, as a kid, you obviously pick up the subliminal pressures of your parents, family. Everyone wants you to succeed because ultimately they're living vicariously through your success, whether they try or not. It's just a reality. They want to enjoy your success because they didn't have that in their opportunity, so they can't help it. And so you feel all of that. So when I was 21 years of age, I knew nothing other than pressure, and I'd let people down, and all that self-loathing that you've got, and all that sort of stuff. And so I was 21. I remember just going, I don't want to do this anymore. And I burst into tears, and that isn't what I was taught to do. You don't show pain, you don't show stuff. It's men don't cry, that kind of classic, that stuff. So I burst into tears. I had to run out the room because I couldn't do that in front of my parents at 21 years of age. And then And then I had to sit back and go, what the fuck do I want to do now? What is it that I want to do? And it's not a surprise that all I wanted to do was just fly out to a resort somewhere and just disappear into the chaos of debauchery almost. You know, I just didn't want any pressure. I wanted to relive those few days you'd get once a year with your mates, which was almost my salvation, really. And it's not a surprise that when I finished playing football, I wrote a list out of things I could do at 21. And the one thing that I was purely like emotionally driven to want to do was just to go back to Faliraki or Magaluf or something and just not have a care in the world for a period of time. So it's not a surprise that that those times gave me salvation. And then when I was at my darkest moment of my life, up to that point, really, when everything was tumbling down, and I wanted to go back to that. Which interestingly, I'd lined some stuff up to go back out to Faliraki. Actually, I'd done Faliraki that year with the Telford lads, and I was going to go back out. And then, as life does, it threw a different thing at me, and I took an opportunity as a job rather than disappearing. But that's what I wanted to do. I wish I had done that now, but you know, so be it.
When you mentioned there about at 21 deciding you didn't want to be a footballer anymore. So, all right, you were playing with Stoke City, who at the time were they Championship or probably dabbling a bit of Premiership.
I'd done the Championship, but I'd left in 2000, and then they cancelled my contract in 2000, so they terminated my contract. I did 2 years as a youth training in the youth training scheme, YTS, and then 2 years as a pro. I never played for the first team. I knocked on the door in my final year and blah, blah, blah. And there's a whole story around that. But truthfully, they cancelled my contract. And so I was then left on the scrap heap. I then got a contract with Telford United in the conference. But that was when the conference was now full-time. So most of the clubs in the conference were full-time. So it was like an extension of the league. And I did a year there. And that's a whole story in itself. The chairman went bust and they pulled all the money and I was left on the scrap heap again. But I was exhausted, mate. I absolutely emotionally gone, shot to pieces, and I had been for years. But of course, you just have to keep going, don't you? That sort of stuff. And so I was at Telford. And that was when I say I chose to not be a footballer. What I mean by that is they cancelled my contract. I just chose to not try and get another one.
Yeah, but obviously at that age, playing at conference level, it wouldn't be unheard of. Play a year with another conference team and get a League Two, League One, Championship club coming in for you. So it didn't necessarily have to be the end of your career forever, but you chose to stop pursuing it at that young age. And sort of my question is that between the age of 8, when you start showing a bit of talent, and this kid could be a pro, and the age of 21 where you chose not to pursue it anymore, were there other times where you didn't want to be a footballer but you kept being a footballer? Or did you admit to yourself before that it wasn't what you wanted to do and you carried on doing it because it was what Jamie did? Jamie's a footballer.
Yeah, so there's definitely, because you're definitely nurtured into a mindset where you're not even realizing you're an autopilot. So it's when I look back, there were players, and I couldn't believe that these players did that 16, 17 got deals at that age, which wasn't that easy. It's not that easy to do, to have that intake at 16. You know, 90%, 95% of kids don't even get to the first intake at 16. You know, you're cold massively at that point. The kids would be 17 years of age and then choose at that age, I don't want to do this anymore, and they would leave football. And I used to, at the time, I could not believe that the opportunity that had been presented for them, that they were choosing to not try. Now I look back on it now, and I now have an enormous amount of respect for those boys, because whether they had a different upbringing, more understanding parents who didn't really live as vicariously through them. And it allowed them to feel safe enough to say, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go and just get a job because I don't want all this bullshit of professional football. Actually, I just want to go. And it only happened a couple of times when in the 4 years I was at Stoke. But the two, I'm good mates with one of the guys still who left it. He just left and said, "You know what? I'm not sure I want to do this," and just left the football club and went on to, he's got a lovely family. He's always been happy. He's had a job for the last 15 years. He's successful in his own right, but he just chose to not do that. And I didn't understand that at the time. I was like, I didn't have an out, right? So that was the only option that I'd got, was to see that through. But there's another part to it, and it's not just because I was being forced to do it, almost subliminally forced to do it. That's what life had taught me to do. I wanted to be a footballer so much, like so much in kind of this unreal world. It meant so much to me to be a footballer, and I think I know why now. I didn't know for a long time, but because I cared so much about being a footballer, what it meant to me being a footballer, it was like recognition. It was like admiration. I was clambering to be admired, or for some reason I wasn't comfortable enough in myself that me being me was enough to be loved, or whatever it might be. And I still can't articulate the answer well enough, but there's definitely, I wanted it that much that when it wasn't quite going well, it bothered me that much. And so rather than have the temperament that you need to be a professional sports person, which is self-belief, none, and didn't believe in myself. So I needed to do well to gain admiration for the self-belief. And then when it was going badly, it was going really, really badly for me emotionally. And so I remember, very, very rarely did I not go onto a football pitch, or in a training session, maybe I'd get bumped up to the resis with the first team gaffer watching, where I'd have that horrible fear, that ball of fear in the pit of my stomach of failure, and how are they perceiving me? What's all of that noise was happening to me regularly, daily, all of the time. So did I want to be a footballer? Yes, absolutely, but for all of the wrong reasons, I think. And those reasons were the reasons why it was so difficult for me to deal with just a day-to-day being a footballer. And that's not even, getting thrown into some pressurized situations where you're playing the biggest game of your life. And I would go into that and I couldn't see it for what it was. It was a game of football, and the outcome's the outcome, and actually for me, it was far greater than that, just far greater. And the pressure that I put myself under was immense. And it was, and it was also stretched back to hiding a secret from my past. And, I've talked about this before, this idea that everybody knew that I was a victim of abuse, and actually, but I hadn't told anyone. And there was this X on my back. I felt that fear that I was going to be outed by anybody at any point. All of these concoctions of problems, just made it difficult to just perform on a football pitch.
On that note that you just said there, and obviously, like tackle the elephant in the room. You talked about how 12, 13 years old, you were going through some really difficult times, and sort of in your early teens were a bit more troubled, but in your later teens, when you started to become a lot happier and things like that. And then when you just said there about how some people, is that hypothetical that you were thinking some people might know my secret, and what if they tell, or did some people actually know? Well, for listeners that don't know your story, like, just if you don't mind, just fill in that
it makes
gap
sense.
in.
Yeah, so I joined a football club when I was 11, 12 years of age, and the coach turned out to be a chap called Barry Bennell, who ended up being a prolific paedophile. Unfortunately, I was a victim of him for 2.5 years, and I was one of Barry's boys. And this is to answer your question about did people know. people look back at that time now, and it was blatantly obvious what was going on. There was myself and another kid at the time who was, we'd be the ones that would be staying at his house, particularly more than any other of the boys would. And it was pretty obvious. So it was kind of like, no one wanted to say it. I wouldn't admit it, but it was so obvious, like so obvious. Do you know what I mean? But safeguarding back then isn't what it is today. And he was because of the way the world was when it comes to safeguarding, he had really easy access to commit the crimes that he did. And so I then, in 1994, he was arrested. I was with him in Jacksonville, Florida when he was arrested. So he had decades of abuse, hundreds of boys, and there I am in a hotel in Jacksonville, Florida. Lift opens, and this chap walks forward and asks him, "Is Barry Bennell?" And he goes, "Yeah." He says, "Come with me, please." He walked off, and I've never seen him again. I've only ever seen him in handcuffs on TV ever since then. But off he went. But then I was left with that aftermath, right? So what do? You're a 14-year-old boy. You've been hiding this thing for 2.5 years. You're embarrassed. Like, the embarrassment, the idea that somebody would know that took place. I couldn't handle the embarrassment. I couldn't show emotion anyway in front of people. It just wasn't how I was built to act. So it was like, everything's all right, everything outwardly, everything's cool. Inwardly, I was in a world of pain. That fight-flight emotion was just a daily occurrence all the time, constantly having to deal with that nervousness, that panic that no child should ever have to live like that. But I lived like that. And then after that, that panic and anxiety flipped from my protecting myself from him and to actually protecting myself from the outer world. It was, I can't divulge my dark secret because the pain and the fear of doing that. I never felt safe enough to do it. I was asked once by somebody of a professional nature, and that was in America, and a police officer asked me in an interview if Barry had touched me in any way, and my reply was, if he had done, I'd have punched him in the face. That's what I said. I was like, yeah, Was
that imminently after he'd been arrested, sort of in the aftermath of all that?
Literally, yeah. He was arrested. They then obviously I was this 13-year-old kid standing in a lift with a towel around me because we'd been to the pool, and then the guy who was my guardian had just been walked off. So I was then ushered into a room in the guts of the hotel where I was just interviewed there and then with no adult support. There was 2 people with clipboards, I think, if I remember, over my shoulder, and the police officer asking me questions, and I just sat in this seat. And the thing is that I was beyond my years, and I was always aware what was going on all the time. So before I was subjected to any kind of physical abuse, I knew it was coming, and I had to protect myself as best as I could against it, but also play the game, because you can't. If you didn't play Barry's game in some respect, then he would make your life really fucking difficult. Really difficult.
He held the keys to your dream.
The star maker, right? But also all your parents think that.
Mm.
So he's cast a spell over everybody. So you have to play the game, and I did play a game where I had to protect myself the best I could around him, but also play the game enough that I was still going to be picked for the team and all sort of stuff like that. And also, if we got there at weekends, if you weren't kind of receptive, if you like, then the weekend you would be the one that's doing all the shit tasks for all the other kids. He would talk to you in a different way. You just feel shit. And the irony of this, and sort of the paradox of this situation, is that the last place you wanted to be was near him and in his house, yet you would then clamber over each other to be his right-hand boy. And that was the twisted nature of the situation. So, and that's how I lived. And coming back to what I said earlier about being on the football pitch and trying to prove myself, and to it's all intertwined with that 2.5 years of mental psychological manipulation in what your role is as a footballer. It was twisted because of his intentions, not what was right for you. So I left that part of my life being programmed a certain way. And then rather than, like, I cared so much about what the coach thought of me. That was the important thing. So when I went into life, after him and went into football at 16 and 17, I was programmed to my success is dependent on the reaction I got from my coach. And actually, I shouldn't have given a shit about him. I should have just dealt with my own game, done my own thing, and been confident in my own ability to just deliver. And how he reacts to how I play shouldn't affect my emotion, my mood, and my focus and what I'm doing. And it was quite the opposite. I could talk for hours about the complexities around it, I then left that kind of at 14. I left that behind me in the sense that we'd been boxed off from a criminal perspective. I just, I never touched me, don't talk to me again sort of thing. Came back to the UK, and then I went into football as in 14, 15, 16-year-old. And the reason why I felt like I got an X on my back is because a lot of the kids I'd played with at that team came with me through the next 5-6 years of football. They knew, and I know that they knew. And to be fair, I didn't know whether they were also a victim of him as well, but it was never spoken about. The victims in the midst of it happening would never talk to each other about it happening. It's such a strange situation. You're just so manipulated into psychologically. It's really difficult. And so that was where all that panic and anxiety came about. Panic attacks at 12 years of age. I remember it clearly, the first one I had, and the mental struggles around that. And you're still trying to show everybody outwardly that everything's fine. So I became the master of disguise. Right? I was this confident, articulate, ahead of my years. I was head boy at school. Nothing stopped me from what it outwardly looked like I was performing well. But that was my safety mechanism. So if I overperformed, and if I constantly showed this outward positivity and this kind of ability to function highly, then it would push people so far away from my truth, which I couldn't let them understand. So when people talk about abuse victims, show these typical signs of they're withdrawn, and they're withdrawing themselves, and they change their behavior and this, that, and I went the opposite. I went the opposite way. And so no one would have ever known. And later in life, when we'd have met, when it would have been 7-8 years ago, I'm life and soul of the party and all that sort of shit, or one of those, and that again is just later in life carrying on what I had to do to keep my past as a dark secret, not let people know what it was. So it was an interesting and difficult time in my life, but I got through that. I still got a contract at football. I still cracked on. I'd go onto the pitch riddled with fear and panic and anxiety. I'd have panic attacks when I'd go home after training. All that was happening, and I would just never talk to anyone. Everything was fine. Just crack on and deal with it yourself, And I think the world's a different place now, and I would hope that if I was a 16-year-old today, having those feelings of panic and anxiety, I would feel safe enough to talk to a coach or whatever they might have at a club to be able to sit and talk about those feelings and be able to some degree, learn how to deal with them in that very pressurized situation. And if that was the case, I don't know what I could have done as a footballer. Unfortunately, it kind of, it strangled me and paralyzed me. And I just couldn't perform anywhere near like I wanted to because of all the things I've described, really.
It's both perfectly understandable yet completely incomprehensible to me at the same time. Because I'm very fortunate, touch wood, I've never been in, I didn't suffer any trauma as a kid at all. So from that level, I like you're speaking a different language to me. My experience growing up was completely different, and so I can't understand what it must have been like. But then at the same time, hearing about you, and maybe that's an ounce of maturity creeping into me at long last. Like I can kind of, I can kind of understand how that might have completely fucking derailed you, especially where, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking if you're at times competing to be one of Barry's boys, because if I'm in, then that might get me unfavourable. My name might be mentioned to this club or that club, or I might get put forward for this trial or that trial, and I might I might get exactly what I want by this association. But then at the same time, you've got internally that kind of the embarrassment, the fear, the anxiety, I've got insert any emotion here, and I'm sure you went through it. And then once that's all done and it's gone, and you are talented as a footballer, you can compete, you can hold your own based on your playing merit. But then I'm assuming in your later teens, do you then have that turmoil of I have to prove to myself that I deserve to be here because I'm good enough to play at this level, and I'm not just here because of I got a bump up because of all of those instances that I'm trying to forget. And would that be sort of fairish to say?
I think, I mean, the catch-22, for want of a better expression, of that 2.5 years of sort of 11 to 13 and a half, whatever, is, in a nutshell, is exactly how you described it. It's every bean in your body does not want to be near the guy, but yet conversely, you're absolutely wanting to be near him because of the benefits of that. So it's a horrible situation. But then in addition to that, you're dealing with a level of fear and panic all of the time, and you're constantly aware of the language he uses, his body language, how he's acting all of the time, every minute that you're around him. Because you don't know how you've got to protect yourself or act a certain way or whatever, and it's this persistent being so switched on to the mood and the feel and everything all of the time, because you've got to act a certain way to be in line with, be at the top of the pecking order, but you've got to protect yourself at the same time. So you're constantly in this state of you're in this survival, fight, flight situation where all of your senses are aware all of the time, to protect yourself, but to also play the game, because you've got to. But then when it came to the sort of the serious side of football, so 94 was when he was arrested. I got signed at 16. I was playing for Stoke at 12, 13, 14, 15, but 16 is when you get taken in, as I say, to full time. That was the big jump in, and that's when shit got real, really. That's when it got real. But I'd already shown signs of sort of emotionally imploding on a football pitch prior to that at certain points, to the point where I was kind of, my emotional, the way I call it, I implode emotionally, which then it would manifest itself physically. So simple tasks that any footballer should be able to do, I found really difficult. My body wouldn't react how it should react. So I'd felt those as a 14, 15-year-old, but I didn't understand them. So I'd be in the pitch in the middle of a game, and I literally would just get overwhelmed by this panic and fear, and then I physically couldn't. But I had to continue to function in that state. And that then stayed with me through my football career. So I could never trust myself on a football pitch because I never knew whether I was going to implode. And that just creates this, there's so much noise going on in your mind, when actually you need to quieten everything down. Because, when they talk about, sports people being in the zone, or whatever they call it. It's when there's no emotion and there's nothing. They are just reacting naturally to a situation. That's where you've got to get to be at your best and perform at your best. I was so far at the other end of the spectrum, so far, that the noise was so much, and therefore the emotion attached to it. I was never present. I was always thinking, what would happen if? You know, all of that stuff is the complete wrong way to be, to try and be a professional sports person. And that was all of a result of the trauma of psychological trauma of being a child in and around that world, and then coming out of that full of panic, disillusioned, fucking confused. A view on life as a 14-year-old is totally different to what it should be. But it was my reality, and I didn't know anything different. And then carrying that into a pressurized world of professional football, and then trying to deliver. And I used to have a lot of resentment around football because, you know, what ifs and all of that. And my 2 years of therapy, one of the light bulb moments I had was I told myself that I was mentally weak all my life. I just said that when I really needed to, I couldn't produce. And I told myself that for years and years and years. As a 40-year-old, I sat in one of my therapy sessions, and through therapy, as you know, they get you to talk more than them, and you end up coming up with most of your answers more than them. But she did say one thing, and I asked my therapist to be more forceful with me. I want you to have more of an opinion. I want you to poke me more, because you won't get much out of me otherwise. And she just said to me, she was like, Jamie, given everything you just described over the last 12 months to me, do you not think you're potentially one of the strongest mentally in your team to even deal with that and still be a professional footballer and still get 2 contracts and still perform at that level? And I was like, right, okay, let me try and consume what you're saying. So for the last 20 years or more, 25 years, I've been telling myself I can't perform under pressure. And you're suggesting to me that actually you were under more pressure, or I was under more pressure than anyone else on that pitch, and I still performed. That's what you're saying. She was like, well, consider that as an idea. And then I just sat back and went, fuck, that is mind-blowing for me.
It's amazing, isn't it? Where sometimes where you, I don't know, I don't want to go all Tony Robbins on you, but when you just stop and reframe things, and like glasses half empty, half full, like the optimism, pessimism, and like sometimes when you just stop and reframe things, you go, fuck, all of that wasted time and effort negatively that could have been positive. Like essentially, you were playing top flight academy level football with your fucking shoelaces tied together, and still being good enough to compete with a load of players who have probably gone on to become household names, and you were doing it with your fucking with a blindfold on, and you metaphorically, of course, but mentally with the baggage that you were carrying, the barriers that you had up, you might as well have had your laces tied together.
And by the way, all of this is absolutely no excuse for why I didn't have a career in football. It's not an excuse. This is just the reality. There's no, just if I didn't have my experience with Barry, it does not mean for a second that I would have been a successful 15-year career footballer. That I am not saying any of that. What I am saying is, I think it would have been easier for me to perform and excel without that. That's what I think. It just still doesn't mean I would have had a career. I get that, and this is not. I'm completely not blaming this. It is my reality, but yeah, I think I had that light bulb moment where I thought to myself, and do you know what? Since that moment, so imagine in business, you're about to go and present to a group of people, right? The fear that I used to have around that. And I still get the fear, but it's a different fear now. But the fear I had because I told myself for so long that I don't deliver under pressure. So any given situation I would put myself in, I would question whether I was going to deliver it, because I have a tendency to not. But the important thing is because I'd lived with that pit of the stomach fear all my life, it would never stop me from putting myself in that situation. So no matter how bad the fear was, if my conscious brain said, you should do this, I would do it anyway. Because I'd been conditioned to that anyway. So, and I think that's part of my makeup, and part of the reason why I've done all right in life, because I feel that fear, and I'm all right in that world of fear. But the talking about how you perceive things from that moment when she had me consider my past differently, I'm having to rewire that still, and I still get all the emotion and all that thump to the pit of your stomach of fear when I'm about to go into a situation where I can be judged, or I can potentially trip over, or whatever. But then I load that with a conscious, but you are one of the strongest people that you know. Now that might sound conceited and arrogant, but it's it's not, I don't say it outwardly. I'm only saying it for the sake of this podcast, but I will say that to myself to try and consciously rewire my natural emotion of fear of failure, and that I'm not mentally strong. I will go, well, hang on a minute, that isn't true, is it? And I will consciously tell myself that, and it helps balance the fear. It still doesn't mean I can't rewire 25 years of questioning my ability, but I'm slowly getting there, you know. Yeah.
Mate, we've probably been talking for an hour, and I haven't even asked you the first question yet. Technically, I'm only 6 questions into my 8-question quickfire round. But
oh shit, really?
Fuck it.
Sorry,
no, mate, fuck it. Well, I was going to ask you about an hour ago what would be the last hobby you would do, and who would be the last icon that you would want to hear from. But we can do them now, real quick. What would be your last hobby?
The last hobby I would do, it'd be a round of golf in a warm climate with 3 of my best mates. That would be
Magaluf Golf Course. It is then. Yeah. And then who would be the last iconic person that you would want to be exposed to?
I think it would be Nelson Mandela.
Oh, nice. So they elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I visited Robben Island, where he's in prison for sort of 27 years, and the ability to be oppressed like he and his peer group were, to then be imprisoned for 27 years. The way they turned prison into a positive for themselves while they were in there. People came out with degrees because of the education. You know, just the most amazing story. And he was a talisman of that. To then come out of that and then unite a country, not further divide it, and use his interpretation of his past, he used to his advantage, and to then deliver what he delivered and how he did what he did as the president. I mean, it's a remarkable story, and to sit with somebody with that level of wisdom and foresight and the hardship that he's gone through, the adversity he faced, all of those things, and to then do something so great like he did, I just find that awe-inspiring. And so I think that's who I'd sit and have a conversation with.
It's a good shout, and it's a great reason. Like the iconic pictures of him and Francois Pienaar lifting the '95 Rugby World Cup, and how Mandela then was almost like a hero, a global hero, like a national icon, having been through what he had been through. And you sort of there's an interesting thing you talk there about how, using Mandela as that example, how he had been through shit. If anybody had any right to hold a grudge or to have a chip on their shoulder or to walk around like a bit of an arsehole because they've got beef with everyone, it would be him. Yet he chose not to do that, because what does that achieve? And my revenge, or whatever you call it, like all of those emotions, like the first part of my question would be like, do you ever feel or experience any of them, like towards Bennell?
And I think that's why it resonates so much with me. in the last 3 years, the process I've been through since disclosing, since waiving my anonymity, and then understanding now how to live in a completely different way, because I've had to learn a new operating system, because the old operating system isn't required anymore.
Yeah.
You know, fear, anxiety, hiding the past, walking around, self-loathing because I'm walking around with a secret, I'm not being honest with everybody. All of those things that I live with have gone now. And I was left with this sort of like, I didn't know what to do with myself. And so I had to fill the gaps in my life again. Is that why am I getting up in the morning? How do I operate around people? All of that. This is a long-winded answer to the reasons why, about the Mandela question. A lot of the stuff that he stood for, when he was in the pits of hell, almost, and what he then did when he came out, my life is not. I'm not trying to in any way try and put myself in his level in any. But my point I'm making is things resonate with me about that, and I think that the only way you can live in the present, not just exist, is to interpret your past in the best way you can to give you the peace in the moment and then optimism in the future. And what's interesting about that for me is in my opinion, in my experience, I had to go through intensive counseling to unravel me as a person, to layer it all back and get right to the real pain, build it back up again through therapy. So I had to go through that process for me to then even be able to entertain looking at my past in a different way. So I couldn't just wake up and go, right, my past, I'm going to interpret it differently. There was too much in there that I needed to work through before I could then almost get back to sort of a neutral position, or at least a position where the past didn't attach lots of like real strong emotion and anger and all of the other stuff. I could sort of see past all the negativity and the shit and start to see the rays of light of what actually I got from that period of time. And that's what I now choose to do. And that's what I've done. I've looked back at those times, and I look back without the pain and resentment and anger that at one point in my life, I used to say to myself, and I used to drive down the road in my car. I'm not a violent person, but I would drive down the car and I used to think to myself, what if he walked on that path there and I saw him, I'd run the fucker over. Like the pure, I don't give a fuck about my life, but I am going to run you over, you cunt. It was that raw, that fucking emotive. That's how it made me feel. That was in my mid to late 20s. I remember going through this process when I was starting to become more of a man, and I was starting to think about the person I wanted to be. I was becoming more self-aware than I ever had been. It then brought up this, fuck, you really have fucked me up, you know, and it was that load of anger for a while. But I've had to work through all of that, and I've had to peel it all back, and I've had to process it with a professional for me to be receptive to see it differently, cut through the negativity and see what that past actually has given me, and how can I interpret that differently. And then therefore you're not just a survivor, as they call us, you know, you're a thriver, as I like to say. You know, it's about thriving, not just existing. And what I've had to do to be able to thrive, and I'm still working on it, but I've had to interpret my past differently. But it's been a few years and professional help to enable me to do it. But now I'm in a place where I'm full of optimism. I'm peaceful in the moment, and I understand now the difference between the challenges that life throws everybody day to day, the ups and downs. I understand what they are in a normal world now, and then therefore I can handle those in a normal way. But for years and years, I didn't understand what would be a normal depressive mood for someone, or I'm a bit of a low mood today, right? I didn't have a yardstick for any of that. So my depressive mood would be, well, my low mood was fucking manic depression, but I didn't understand that that wasn't what people deal with. Now I understand what is more normal for people in life. And it's because of reliving the past in the right fashion, dealing with it through therapy, and then being able to consider how I want to see it for benefit today and moving forwards. And that's the process I'm in the middle of now. But I've managed to turn the corner a lot to start being optimistic, and be peaceful in the present, really.
Mate, that is the end of the quickfire intro round. I'm going to move on. Yeah. Question 1, and obviously we've skirted around the issue quite a lot, but as we sit here now, who is Jamie Cartwright?
Yeah, and it's funny because how I'd answer this question 3 years ago would be so different to how I'd answer it today. But I'm a friend. I'm a family man. I'm a businessman, I suppose you could call me. I'm a pragmatist. I'm an optimist. I'm somebody that understands that, you know, life throws you all sorts of things, and the person that I am today is completely open and receptive to what the future holds, rather than filled with paranoia and fear. And I feel that the person, you know, Jamie Cartwright, is somebody nowadays that I hope people enjoy being around, not because, how to explain it? I want people to spend time with me, and I want them to feel inspired and positive about who they are on what the future looks like. And that's the most important thing, I think, for me nowadays. And it doesn't matter who they are. It could be someone I catch up, it could be a taxi driver I have 10 minutes with, and I'm not banging a drum and preaching. You know, that's not my intention. But if I have conversations with people, I don't want to be negative. I don't want to detract. I don't want to be an emotional vampire. All of that stuff. I want to be positive, optimistic, pragmatic, and I want people to take that from me as a human, I suppose.
Would it be fair to say that, I mean, you drew a line in the sand and said 3 years ago you were a different person? Would it be fair to say, in a nutshell, that Jamie Cartwright 3 years ago was the complete opposite of what you just described?
Yeah, I suppose I might talk a good game at that time, but did I truly believe it? You know, I remember saying to my missus before we had James, and it's terrible to think, but I said to her, and at the time I just said it, but now I understand what it means to say this. But we hadn't got any children, and we were considering it, and I said, why would you bring a child into this world? You know, made me just sort of, and I kind of,
because your normal was a fucking despicable, depraved, innocent childhood ruined.
Yeah, and also how I felt at the time when I said that. Every day was a fucking battle to wake up in the morning, to brush my teeth, to get out of bed, to do it. Every single day was a challenge, like a fucking horrible challenge at that point. And that's how I felt. So, but that was my norm. Right. So I wasn't, in my mind, I wasn't going through a bad time. That is it. So for me to say that, you know, it's terrible to think that I would say that, but I did. And it was just how I felt. And so Jamie Cartwright today wouldn't say that. You know what I mean? But that's the difference in who I was and who I am, I suppose.
In coming in during those 3 years, and when all of this kind of fell into the national media, and you like I became aware of it with your appearance on the SAS program. And there was a scene in there where Ant Middleton says to you, be honest with yourself, it's what sets you free as an individual. And that it sounds like that is a very powerful thing for you to have experienced and to have heard. Like those
imaginably
barriers that you had up with the, I don't know, the secrets and the lies or what have you. So how big an impact did that have, like, by being honest with yourself, and how free did it make you?
So when you are confident enough to tell your truth, to be honest, the truth will set you free. That is my experience. And one of the things that I said, so interestingly, I came out of like intensive therapy after about 2 years nearly. And I got to this natural end of the therapy, and I was like, right, we were just sort of talking about life by this point, me and my therapist. We weren't, and it was obvious. It was like, okay, well, we'll now spread it out longer, and I'll give you a shout when I need you, sort of thing. And I came out of that, and once I'd told one person about my past, I'd started the ball rolling, and I then wanted to tell the fucking world. Like, that's how it made me feel, because if I told you my truth, I was not lying to you, and it was helping me not hate myself. And that's with the self-loathing was the biggest problem I had, which is why I ended up getting the therapy more than anything. And so it was helping me. So I talk metaphorically about being able to, once I told one person I wanted to stand on the top of a mountain and tell the world, I wanted to shout it.
Yeah.
So when I came out of therapy, I then applied for SAS Who Dares Wins, like 2 weeks after. And ironically, I was standing on the top of a fucking mountain in the Scottish Highlands, 9 months later, filming the show, and telling my truth to an international audience. And it gave me that metaphorical mountain to tell my truth on. And as scary as it was, I knew that was going to be a life-changing moment for me, because most people were going to see it. And if they didn't see it, the people who did see it would tell the people who know me, did you see it? And I kind of knew that I was going to tell my truth. And it was, as scary as it was to do it, I just knew it was something that I wanted to do. And so the show gave me that metaphorical mountain to stand on and shout from the rooftops. And it, it was.
There's obviously I've got nothing to compare in terms of the magnitude of things to say or to admit, but I've definitely been in situations where can't tell people that what if they think this, what if they do that, and the reason you don't announce something is because of this mythical made up fear of what bad things might happen in the future. It's not based on any actual facts, but you're more scared of what's going to happen. But I'm wondering, I'm trying to sort of fill in the blanks here myself. I wonder, is that when you tell that first person in confidence in a professional setting, they can't tell anybody, but you tell them and nothing bad happens. Not only does nothing bad happen, but there's like a little weight lifted off your shoulder, and then
that's right.
And then it starts becoming a habit, a positive habit, rather than a negative habit of storing it away.
And what actually happened for me was Andy Woodward was the guy that ended up waiving his anonymity, and he was a victim of Barry, and he was a few years older than me. And he was the guy that broke the story with the Guardian, and then that's when it started to gain all of its momentum. And he went on one of the national TV shows, and I remember him from back in the day. He was a few years older than me, and so we never actually played football with each other, nor did but I remember him from Barry's house and stuff like that. So he went on TV, and I was like, right, do you know what? I'm going to tweet him, because I was like absolutely blown away by what he was doing. And obviously at this point, I hadn't said anything to anyone. And the only way I could talk to him was to tweet him. So I tweeted him and said, mate, I absolutely think you're amazing what you're doing. It's so inspirational. I didn't let on anything at this point. He tweeted me immediately back and just went, mate, I remember you. And I was just like, oh. And he said, send me a number, I'll ring you.
Was that in your head? Was that him saying, I know what happened to you. I knew then, I've known since, we're on the same team.
Right. So I'm then going, hang on a minute, this is a moment here, and he called me, and he just had this assumptive conversation with me. So he was like, mate, we're going to fucking get him. We're getting a lot of them. Stick with us. And I was just like, okay, mate. And I didn't even ask me. He just was like, we're doing this shoulder to shoulder together. And I was like, mate, all right, then I'm in. And he was like, ring Cheshire Police. I'll give you the number, WhatsApp me the number, whatever. And then just join the investigation. And that's just, we're going to do this together. And I put the phone down. And I was like, that's it, then I'm in. And I rang Cheshire Police and said, I need to make a complaint, whatever I said. And I went through the process and I started it. And it was so emotional at the time. And the reason why I had to do it was because they had the balls to do it, and I would not allow them to do it on their own. And that was the main reason why I was doing it. I was like, if they're going to do that on national TV, I am going to stand next to him, because they're making a difference. And Andy took his time to call me. It was like, I'm going into ITV now. I'm literally about to go on TV in 10 minutes, but I had to call you, Jamie. So, and and that 10-minute conversation literally fucking changed my life. And that's the reason why when I went on SAS and I told my truth, and I do talks now about it, I know that there is people listening to those talks. And I know that because they contact me afterwards. And I had 10 minutes with Andy Woodward, and it changed my life, completely changed my life. So if I can bang that drum, if I can give people 10 minutes, whatever it is, I know it will change their life. They don't have to exist. They can thrive. They just need to learn how to, and they need help to get there. And the first thing they have to do is be honest with themselves and be honest with the people around them. They need to feel safe about that. And when they can, and you're absolutely right, it perpetually gets better, because we suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality more often than not. And that's the bit that it's just that bravery to go and ask that question. If I can inspire someone and give them the safe place or the bravery just to say something, once they start that, that's when it starts to go. And that's when they start the healing, and then they learn how to live, not just exist.
It's so surreal, because I still remember, I can picture myself sitting in the house I was living in at the time, watching that interview with Andy on ITV live, breaking news. I remember watching it because of the involvement I've had over in the years with professional football and stuff like that. My ears pricked up, and it's so weird to now think that someone who I've been mates with the whole time, were involved in the background of that same story, with me being completely oblivious, and would never have in a million years have pieced those pieces together. It's so surreal, and it's fucking scary how, when I said I don't like doing too much research, but I did it last night, and sort of like I was thinking about this conversation and what the fuck am I going to say? How's it going to go? And I was watching a few bits. I was trying to do a little tiny bit of research. I was trying to do a bit of research into people who abuse children and why they do it, what makes them do it, and some of the stats that come up. again, don't quote me on this, anyone who's listening, because some of them could have been based on purely individual countries or cities or something. But there's some of the numbers. There's like one stat was something like 1 in 4 girls, or like 1 in 7 or 8 boys, or something like that will suffer some form of abuse in their lifetime. And when I worked at a children's home very briefly for 6 months, so I had to go through no end of like safeguarding training and courses, stuff like that. And a lady came in to do the safeguarding course, and she was very blunt, very direct, and she was like, I tell you now, on every street in this country there is a child who either is being abused or has been abused. It's like not in every town, not in every suburb, in every fucking street in this country, there is a child that is being groomed and abused.
And this is the reality. I'm at the forefront of it. I work on an FA support group now, which shapes safeguarding around professional football, Premier League, EPL, grassroots. So I'm right at the forefront of it, listening to the studies and listening to everything that. And you're absolutely bang on. People might talk about, listen to my story and go, yeah, but that was in the 90s. Do you know what I mean? This kind of flippant sort of, it's not like that anymore.
It was different back then.
Yeah, right. So the monsters that are still being born to this day, they are still going to grow into monsters. It is what it is. They won't stop. It just means that they're not doing it in the same way that they used to. The online space is the biggest problem. And so if you as a parent listen to what you just said there and say on every street there is a child that's been subjected to or is going to be, how do you walk through your life? How vigilant do you now need to be? If you know, and these are deviants, these are people that will find a fucking way. They will find a way. And so
it's easier than ever with fucking social media and the internet.
Hide behind it. Absolutely that. And if something that I was involved with the FA is a parents and carers course through the FA. It's free. And the point of it is it's just to educate parents to the signs of abuse, not just with their child, but what is how is the coach acting? What's happening to create this situation where an abuse of trust can take place, whether that be digitally or whether that be in person. So you're absolutely right. And every time I do a talk, I will get a number of people who will message me after the event, or will come to me at the event if they feel confident enough and will tell me things that they've never told anyone in their life. It happens every single time. Something that I had to be aware of after I did a couple of talks is that after the talk, like there was one the other day, there was a bit of a social afterwards. I have to look after myself, because if I end up having a few drinks and then people are starting to talk to me about their horrific stories, which is what happens, I need to be able to be in control of myself, because it is intense. So, throughout my SAS application, throughout the program, and ever since then, all I ever said to the producers and anyone was, if you sensationalize my story, I'm not interested. I'm out. The minute I feel like you are sensationalizing my story, I'm out. The purpose of this is to tell my truth, and it's my truth only. And the reason for that is because I know it will it'll have a positive effect on people who are living the life that I've lived and haven't yet told their truth. So, and I've said that all the way through. And it's the same with my talks. It's just about, here's my reality, and I'm going to give it to you because you need to hear it. Because if you hear it, then it puts context into the rest of this conversation. And it'll also, I hope, create a level of more focus on being vigilant and protecting and safeguarding, because you're absolutely right. They haven't gone anywhere. They just don't do it in plain sight as much as they used to because of the safeguarding measures. Thank goodness that is the case. But there's a shed load more work to do.
It's scary, especially as now being a dad, having children. Right, they're 1 and 3 at the minute, so the the innocence and the magic of the world is all they see. But in 10 years time, that's going to be a different matter. And despite the fact that I live in the middle of nowhere in a little village, like it's still statistically there will be a kid in my village or children in my village. Absolutely. And it's so fucking scary. So I mean, hopefully that, like I say, that perpetual sort of gaining momentum of the more people who do start to tell their truth and do start to then be freed as an individual, to paraphrase from Mr. Middleton, the better, because fuck me, there's a scary amount of people that you bump shoulders with on a daily basis that will have been through a version of this.
And that's the drum I'm beating, right? It's not as easy to just tell your truth. It's, you know, you can't just wake up one day and go, do you know what? I'm going to tell my truth today. Because sometimes it's a process. Sometimes it's a process. Sometimes it's what my process was. Most men, statistically, when they get to the age of around 40, if they have historical trauma in their life, sexual abuse, when they get to 40, they start to get to a point where they feel safer to say something. That's statistically the case. And that coincided with Andy's, for me, that coincided with Andy's disclosure and then waiving his anonymity, and that kind of, so it worked well for me in the timings, if you know what I mean. So there is a right time, most definitely, but all I want to do, and I've said this a number of times, is if this conversation, if when I'm talking to people and my honesty, if I can bring the day that they're ready to speak closer to them, every day they gain a day back on not just existing anymore. They start the process. So it might be I do a talk, you know, today or tomorrow or last week, and it might be 2 years down the line that someone's then ready to deal with it and actually face up, because they listened to me. It was only 2 years. It wasn't 5 or 10 or 15. Because it has to be right. That's my experience anyway.
When let's say you take your typical 40-year-old, let's say using your story and your timeline, like the abuse happens as an adolescent, as a child, and then 40, this magical sort of line whereby it's easier to talk about it. Is there an alternative fork in the road where they don't talk about it, and then the repercussions and the knock-on effect of that are in extreme cases, you're going to get people jumping in front of trains and jumping off multi-stories, but like or the additional turmoil that they're fucking living by continuing isn't going to end well for them.
I think everyone's stories their own story, their own journey. As we know, my experience isn't the same as everybody's. There's lots of synergy between the people I talk to, but everybody's is different. I think that, and this is probably again how things happen. My experience is, there was a famous Welsh footballer, played in the Premier League, ran the Welsh national team. His name's Gary Speed. Unfortunately,
I used to work with him at Sheffield United, and up until he passed away, he was probably one of the nicest men I ever met in football. So I never met Gary Speed, but my connection to him is, obviously you saw who he was as a person and the way he portrayed himself. He just looked like an absolute class act, and you just confirmed it, right? He just absolute class act. He got everything that you'd need in life, and you look at it, you know, it was a well-respected professional footballer, played top flight football, family man, just everything was how you'd want to be as a pro, right? And then he, as we know, he then kills himself and doesn't say why. So he's left this unknown reason for everybody that was close to him, and everyone's still the same. But
my connection to him was that he'd been coached by Barry Bennell for a few years when Barry was in Manchester way. And Barry used to say to me and my parents that I reminded Barry of Gary Speed. So I was a similar sort of player, I was a similar sort of, and that was kind of stuck with me. So every time I saw Gary Speed play football on the telly, I would just have this nice positive thing about, there's a top flight footballer that Barry Bennell's telling me that and I'll never forget in 2011 when he killed himself. I had a moment of complete fear because at that point in 2011, I was early 30s, in all sorts of mental struggles, depressive state, panic. I was on medication for panic disorder. And I thought to myself, fuck, and again, this is me putting two and two together and getting, obviously, it could be getting 7, but it doesn't matter. What it did for me is it panicked me because I thought, right, if he is capable of doing that, I can't trust myself. As in, I'd had suicidal thoughts and I never thought I'd carry through with it. But when I saw that he did that, I was like, fuck, right. And there was this connection that, and it like jumped me on. It made me go, I need to be really careful about myself. And so I tried therapy about a year after that, and it just didn't work. I won't get into the detail around that. I did like 4 sessions with someone. It was just an horrific experience. And so I tried, and then I held it together. And then eventually, thankfully, when Andy came forwards, then the FA put their hand up to go, we didn't do as much as we should have done. And then they, through Sporting Chance, Tony Adams charity, they funded unlimited therapy for survivors. And that gave me the time to unravel the past. But there's things how things drop into your life and make a difference to you. That was a big moment for me. I was like, oh fuck, if somebody who you would perceive on the outside has got everything that you need in life, couldn't handle life. And I was like, right, I need to seriously look after myself here because I can't trust myself as much as maybe I thought I could.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a scary thought, isn't it? Where you're like, you're almost staring down the barrel of a gun, proverbially speaking. Probably not the best analogy I could have used.
No, you're right. And
then it gives you it. You've got one foot in the door, haven't you? Like you're like, shit. Actually, I've had these little thoughts like, oh, I could kill myself. Then that'd all end. Oh, stop it. Shut up, Mark. Like, go away. Like those little conversations happen often. I think even the most normal, most rational, most sane people have those conversations with themselves, but they're very easily able to ignore it and for it to go away because they know it's just a silly little voice in their head. But when you actually get a foot in the door and you're like, fuck, I am carrying all of this stress and pressure internally. I'm struggling to cope with it. I've idolized this man as a player who I've been compared to in my youth, and he's just fucking hung himself in his garage. Maybe that's what I should do. Like those conversations can become a lot more real.
And I literally said to myself, you're gonna have to do something. You can't live like this anymore. You're gonna have to do something. And I tried, but it was just a really bad experience. In short, the PFA, I rang the PFA asking for help. And I was like, look, I need help. And the welfare chap at the time rang me back and he was like, we can give you 6 sessions for free with a local therapist. I had to travel 55 minutes. It took me to get there. I had a 50-minute therapy session. By the time I'd sat down, had a drink and calmed down, and I was about to talk about the most horrific things in my life that I'd never spoke to anyone about, I was then supposed to just deliver something in about 25 minutes and then get in my car and drive an hour back. And I had 6 of those sessions to deal with my past. It just set me up to absolutely fail. And then I walked away from that going, well, this isn't going to work. And then I went back into life then, sort of just dealing with it.
How scary is it that mental health is a massively increasing subject at the minute, but how scary is it that you can be at the bottom of the barrel like that, ask for help, shout out for help, beg for help, get offered a bit of help, attend the help, but it isn't very good help, then you walk out and be like, I wanted help, I got help didn't work, maybe I'm out of options. Like it, there's, kudos to you for failing and then trying again further down the line.
And again, I think this, in my experience, not everybody's, but in my experience, the right help at the right time is essential. And I got the right help at the right time. And I had the luxury of being an ex-footballer, because if I wasn't an ex-footballer, I wouldn't have got 12 months, 18 months of counselling, therapy, paid for by a specific therapist who understood childhood trauma, not just a general counsellor about life, but they found a specific therapist who deals with childhood trauma within 20 minutes drive of where I was. And I was able to get there, take my time. It was open-ended therapy, so I didn't need to worry that I've only got 4 sessions left to get this problem solved. It was just, and it took ages for me to go anywhere near the conversations I needed to go near, like months and months. I was seeing her weekly. Everything about the situation was ideal. I felt comfortable in the room. She made me feel really comfortable. Everything about it. It still took me months and months to go where I needed to go. So that's the reality of unraveling the past. But unfortunately, the services just aren't available. It's just,
it's scary, isn't it? It's worth this. Past of the past. Looking at the future, my next question, how do you want to be remembered? And associated to this question is one piece of the homework that I set you, which was 70 characters of text, which I'm led to believe is how much text you can fit on a standard headstone.
Is that right?
Well, that's what I found out with my shockingly bad research. Typed it into Google and believed the first thing I read, like as you do. So what would you have on your headstone, and then how does that relate to how you want to be remembered?
Now, okay, my headstone is funny because it's not really profound and it's not overly deep, but that's exactly how I'd want it to be. So it says, basically, my headstone says, I had a bloody good go, but more importantly, I didn't die trying. I had a bloody good go, but importantly, I didn't die trying. And what I mean by that, it's this idea that I'm not interested in I'm going about my business and I want to make a difference, but I'm not bothered about gaining adulation. But I'm also not going to go about my business at the detriment of my health, well-being, the people that are important to me. So what I want to be able to, when I sit back and look back, all I want to be able to say to myself is, fuck, you had a good go, didn't you? You had a good go at this thing called life. But what you didn't do is compromise the important things along the way, which is you didn't take chunks out of yourself to try and achieve material goals and stuff like this. You had a good go at it. You lived a fucking good life. You had a go, but you didn't die trying. And that's it.
I was going to say it's made me smile, but it didn't. It makes me laugh. I love the irony and the wit of it's on your headstone, you're dead, and you're saying you didn't die trying, and it's like the irony of that, and the message that comes up, literally, I think every time I've asked someone this question, is that they want to be remembered. People envisage their headstone in a cemetery, or whether it's wherever it's located, like you probably get buried anywhere these days. They don't want people to walk past and just go, oh look, Mark Law's husband and father, beloved uncle, blah 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 blah. This is when he was born, this is when he died, full stop. You've gained absolutely nothing from knowing the dates and what family members I have. However, if you walk past and it says, I had a bloody good go and I didn't die trying, you're going to take a picture of that and you're going to show it to someone, or you're going to remember it, or you're going to go, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
What does that mean? Like, what can I take from that might benefit me? And therefore, then there's this notion has been mentioned a few times. It was John Clark on my second episode that first raised it, about a quote that I think he said comes from Winston Churchill, that everybody dies twice. Once when your heart stops beating, and the second time is the last time anyone ever mentions your name. And depending on how much time there is in between those two, says a lot about you. So like, we're all the first one's going to happen. We've all got it coming. Hopefully not too soon, but it could be tomorrow. So if it does happen tomorrow, what can I do to make sure that the second time I die is as far into the future? So, and to do that, I need to leave an impact. I need to give some people something to think about. I need to pass something on that makes them a better version of themselves. And every single person, unprompted, has kind of done exactly that with the poignant, and you even sort of said, oh, it's like, I can't remember how you phrased it, it's sort of like, as in, like you said, oh, I haven't written anything too profound, but at the same time you've probably written the most profound sentence.
I know what you mean.
I know what you mean.
I think the important thing, the bit about, for me, the bit when I said I had a bloody good go, and I'll be all right with that. If I could sit back and go, I had a bloody good go, that's it. That's enough for me. You know, and then to say, but I didn't die trying. The important thing is, when that moment comes, I'm not going to still be trying. That's the important. I'm going to get, so the important thing is, I'm going to have a bloody good go, but when it's time to check out of this striving, this persistent requirement to better myself every day and to inspire myself and others and all that stuff that makes me get up in the morning, there's going to come a point where I'm going to be content that I don't need to do that anymore. And that won't be, ideally, if I live a full life, you know, to that sort of grand age of whatever it averages 79 when we all die now or whatever. If I get to that point, I will have completed life in my world, if I'd have had a bloody good go, but I knew when the time was to go, I'm all right about it now. I've had a go, and I can be confident when that day comes, that I'm confident about that I had a bloody good go, and I didn't die trying to have a go. That is the important thing.
I don't know if you've even thought about this, but as you're talking and explaining there, and knowing what I know about you personally, and obviously with the things that you've shared in the last couple of hours, is there an element in there subliminally, maybe, with where you're saying I had a bloody good go and I didn't die trying, that relates to when I was given a shit hand, it didn't kill me off. Like, I was abused, but I came out the other side. My dreams of professional football were shattered, but I went on to build a successful business. I built a chain of gyms up that had to get rid of for whatever reason, but then I've moved into another sphere and I've made a success of that. And all that constant, like, I don't know, like the things that you pick up on the SAS stuff about being at the fucking bottom of the barrel, where you think that is it, I'm done, I've got nothing left, and then you learn about yourself. Actually, that was the fucking tip of the iceberg. Wait until you see what's coming, and you're going to get through that, and then we're going to give you even more, and you're going to fucking get through that, because you are way more fucking resilient mentally and physically than you ever could imagine if you fucking accept that and move forwards.
And that's exactly what I mean by this. I had a bloody good go, and that's what I mean. I literally mean, you know, I went to the pits of hell. I drove myself to those places, and I'm willing to keep going there, and I'm willing to love whatever that means. The fear and panic that comes with it, I'm going to accept it, because I'm going to come out a bit better for it. And I never shirked a challenge, and I mean that as a player and also metaphorically. In all, you know, again, when I don't want to revisit this, but this is important on this point. Every time I imploded on the football pitch and I physically couldn't compete like I would normally do, and I couldn't physically act like I would, I never fucking shirked it. I never feigned an injury and walked off the pitch. I never suggested I could. Every single moment I turned up and I kept going. And I look back now and I go to myself, you could have had an easy out there when you were struggling in the middle of a game and your coach is giving you shit.
Hammy's gone.
Easy. I could have easily, and it never, ever, ever crossed my mind, and never, ever considered the idea of taking the easy route out of it. Didn't ever cross my mind. And I think I look back on that now, and it's taken me fucking years to realize it, that I'm willing to put myself right in the mix, no matter what the deal, and back myself. And if it's fucking shit, I'll just keep going.
Do you think, sorry to interrupt you, do you think that could be your phoenix from the flames, like the silver lining, the positive that you learned in a way that no child ever should be forced to learn a lesson like that? But has that given you that resilience that has meant that now you are as successful as you are business wise, as comfortable as you are family wise, as a father, as a husband, as a friend, all of those things? And like, you never know, like this is an unanswerable question, but you might have been a complete prick had you not have been through that shit at that young age.
And that's exactly what I'm now able to interpret my past. You know, that no one likes that moment where you get a shot of adrenaline that drops to the bottom of your stomach, and it's through fear and panic. Nobody likes that moment. It's when you take the phone call and you get some horrific bad news that you never expected, and it goes boom right to the bottom of your stomach, and there's that horrific panic and adrenaline rush, and that feeling was normal for me. It's how I grew up in some of the most. There's times when you're 11 to 13, you're so impressionable and you're learning about life. I live with that feeling in the pit of my stomach regularly. So dealing with things that put fear and panic onto you, and often that's the unknown. Often it's a hand you're dealt with that you don't know what's the answer. You haven't got an answer. Your back's against the wall. How do you come out of that? Well, you're absolutely right. One of those shining lights, one of the things that I look back on my past about now is I go, anything that is thrown at me now, I can deal with, I can stand up and I can forge forwards. No matter how difficult the process is at the start, I will be able to find the light, and I will build on that, and I will eventually be able to interpret that moment in a positive light. And being able to do that provides you with a pragmatic but optimistic outlook, and that's the important thing. I'm not paranoid about the future, and I think that absolutely, my past has created my future and who I am, but I've been able to take the bits that I need to take with me and I should take with me, and leave the bits that don't help me behind.
Which I assume is the bit that those who struggle don't learn to do. They carry the bits that should be left and allow them to derail the future in a negative way.
Mate, and everyone's, again, I'll say it again because it's really important. I'm not the oracle, it's my story. I can only tell my story and what my experience was. But, you know, I had every excuse to be an alcoholic, a drug addict, to just decide to check out a life. I don't give a, you know, who are you to tell me that I shouldn't be this person who's fucking doesn't give a fuck about, you know, hates life, and because I've got every right to be like that. Yeah, I had every right to be like that. And the truth is I chose to not be a victim of it. And I chose to keep forging on. And every time I had a decision to check out and decide to do something that wouldn't be positive and helpful and do the right thing by me and other people, every time I had that decision, and it was a compelling desire at times, I chose what was at the time a harder route. I chose the harder path, which is to keep forging forward, keep trying to be the best version of yourself, despite of all the shit that's trying to drag you down the gutter. And I don't know why I always chose that route. I don't know why. It's a resilience. It's something. Is it the pride I have for myself? I don't know why. Why? I don't know why. But I did. When my back was against the wall and I had a decision to make, I chose the right path, thankfully, not the wrong. But that's my story. A lot of people struggle to not, and they go the other way. And a lot of abuse victims struggle with substance abuse, struggle with relationships. You know, it's a common theme that happens. I don't know why I'm different, but I just am. In that sense, I'm not the majority often of people that suffer with. But I don't know why. And again, I look at that and I just go, don't question it too much. Just take the positive from it, and just move it forwards. You know what I mean?
It's even scarier and heartbreaking to hear that your version of this story is in the minority. So there are way more people, more than 50%, probably not far off 90 odd percent, who have similar situations, and they don't take those routes that you've managed to take. They don't have whether it's internal or external sources that have helped you repair. They don't go down those routes, and there's not a word strong enough to describe it, but it's hard.
Mate, childhood trauma is a burden you don't carry. It's a burden that is within you. You are the trauma. So when I try and describe this to people, because I can hear people almost going to say to me, Jamie, it's your past, let it go. 25 years ago, for God's sake. The difference with the thing about childhood trauma, in my opinion, my experience, is that the person I became as an adult was a result of that. And so it was who I am. It's not something I carry on a rucksack behind me, or I pick it up every morning and it's heavy and I can drop it down. It's who I am, right? So to unravel that, you have to unravel who you are. And it takes a long time. And your perception of life, the way you see your eyes through the life of the person that has been molded by childhood trauma. So you are what it is. And to remove it from you and to get it out of you, you have to reinvent yourself, but you have to understand yourself first. And it's a long process that you have to peel it all back. And my experience was, when I finally peeled it all back, I got to a point where I was then, shit, I don't know how to live anymore. So I came to the therapy and I told my truth and I got all this, but everything I knew my operating system for life had been removed. And I had to go, well, I've got to find another one now. But it took me months to get my head around the idea. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought I'd lost my drive for life. And I was like, I should be the happiest I've ever been. I've been through therapy. I've come off SAS. I've told my truth. What's wrong with me? Why haven't I got this drive and determination anymore? Where's it all gone? And it was simply because I wasn't fueled on fear and panic. I wasn't running away from my past. I wasn't hiding anything anymore. So I now needed to understand, how do I operate today in the present in a peaceful, positive, optimistic, and unconditional state? How can I find that place? And that was the journey that I went on then, when I realized what was wrong with me. And I went on this sort of path of discovery, really, which to build myself an operating system that I can buy into, and I can go, do you know what? Yeah, I can deal with that. And I can take that with me and move forward with that in line with my values and in line with how I want to operate and how I want to affect and what footprint I want to leave on the world and all of that. I had to find that. And I'm still on that path, but I now have something that I can fall back on, as a new operating system. Yeah, it's interesting.
Interesting. It's incredible as well, and I like genuinely appreciate your honesty and your openness about it, because it's an insight that ignorant fucks like me who haven't experienced. It's a whole new world, and therefore it can become. I'm not saying this is what I have ever done or would do, but you can see how easy it is for someone with no experience of that, who just go, oh, come on, that's fucking 30 years ago. Like, well, you get over it. Like, you used to get E17 records for Christmas. Fucking that's in the past. It's done. Tetris was life. Like, it's a different generation now. Just forget about it. Like, you can't. Like, it's not that easy.
You can't, because it is you. So the only way to get rid of it is to end you.
Yeah.
Like that, without professional help to allow you to understand how to get rid of it. So the only way to get rid of it, to end that, is to end you. That's the fucking reality of it. And that's the part that I see when I do my talks. I see people change. I've had people feedback around that, because there's this old school mentality, right? This stiff upper lip, old school mentality that my parents, well, my dad definitely has, because it was passed down from his dad, who was in the war and all that. We don't show emotion. We get on with life, and that's what we do. That's what we do. And when I do my talks, I can feel and see the people in the room who still have that attitude. And when I say to them exactly what I've just described there, which is, it is who you are, not something you carry. And if you want to remove it, you have to remove you, unless you get professional help that allows you to untangle it, remove it from your DNA, bit by bit by bit by bit, replace the right things, give you the parameters that most people will live through life with, a yardstick that you understand what's right and wrong. That's what it can do. But once you rebuild that, then you've got a chance. You've got a chance of understanding the balance of life. And then once you understand the balance of life, then you can then start building on that. And you can still be successful and push hard. And you can tip the balance of life and know that you're going through a bit of a stressful time, but it's not because you're about to fall off a cliff and have a blinking depressive episode, You can handle that, and you've got this idea about what life actually is and what it's all about. And that's that platform to then build from. But you can't just let it go. You can't just put it down.
Oh, mate, it's fascinating stuff to hear. I've got 2 of my 4 questions left, but we've almost done all of the discussion on them up to this point, so I won't keep you too much longer. But as you sit here now, what is the meaning of life, do you think, and why do you think some people might struggle?
So one of the things that has helped me get through the difficult times more than anything is perspective. And what I mean by that is we're all blobs of tissue and bone that have been cobbled together by some evolutionary path or whatever you choose to believe, right? We're floating on a planet in the middle of black space, and no one has any idea. So when we talk about the meaning of life, I look what I've done in the past is I've used this I've sucked myself out of the earth and I've looked in on it. So when my life is like in a real difficult spot, or I'm about to embark on something that I know is going to be super challenging, I might be judged in this, that, and the other, I just remind myself that no one has a fucking idea what we're doing here. We're all walking around just bouncing into each other going, what the fuck is this all about? In truth, right? So what is the meaning of life? I don't know what the meaning of life is in general, and no one does. And sometimes you can use that to your advantage, is my point. But what it means to me is I've been put on this earth to work hard and be better than I was yesterday. It might be very marginally, but at least if I'm moving in that direction, that's important to me. So I'm on this earth to work hard, but I'm also on this earth to inspire myself and other people around me. I truly believe that's what we should be doing. I'm acutely aware that we are dying every second, and therefore my focus around that is not morbid. It's actually every second needs to mean something, and I don't want to waste those seconds. So the meaning of life for me is grasp every single second of it, because every second you'll never get fucking back. And I know it's a cliche, but that is a reality. And I remind myself of that. There's a Stoic quote called Memento Mori, and the Stoic quote basically is exactly that. Remember, you are dying. Remember, you are going to die. It's not a morbid approach. You leverage that to make sure that you remind yourself of that moment all of the time. And then purpose. So the meaning of life, the word purpose comes into it. What's our purpose? What's your purpose? And that was something I really struggled to understand when I was having this moment of kind of, what the fuck's it all about 2 or 3 years ago. I was like, what is this all about? And I got some counsel from somebody, and I was like, look, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't understand what my purpose is. And she was like, well, what are you doing, waiting for it to slap you in the face or ring you on your mobile? So what are you waiting for? And I was like, well, and she said, why don't you just create your own purpose? And I was like, she was like, you are completely in control of what your purpose is. What are you waiting for? I'm like, okay. She says, well, you can. You're in control. And as a person who's a bit of a self-starter, and I like the idea of creating things from nothing, I completely bought into that. So for me, I don't look outwardly anymore for anything. I'm in control of I interpret my past how I want to interpret it. I'm acutely aware that my job on this earth is to wake up, work hard, be better than I was yesterday. You do that because you want to inspire yourself and other people. Unconditionally, I accept and love my fate, and my purpose is something that I'm going to create. And I'm in control of that. And that's I suppose, almost my operating system in a nutshell, really.
A fucking men like that. I'll record that segment and transcribe it into written format, because I think that's if that was off the cuff and just kind of poured out as like a mixture of thoughts and things you've said in the past, all chucked in a blender and regurgitated for me off the cuff, then I can't imagine I'll get many better answers. But mate, that was beautiful. It was nice to hear.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. But the truth is, you're right. But that is a 2-year, in a very short answer. That was 2 years of self-discovery. And when you talk about finding a purpose and this, that, and the other, I was on a mission to put myself back together again in the way that I felt was the right way of doing that. And I don't make any that. I've snapshotted that together with podcasts I've listened to, things on app, all sorts of stuff. I've just been listening to people about their experiences and how they rebuilt themselves. And I just taken parts from different people. I had a coach for a while because I wanted them to have an objective view on my life, and I just went through this process to help me build myself back together again, because I knew it was essential that I did that. So whilst it was off the cuff, it's definitely been built over time. And it's something that I do. When I wake up in the morning and it's cold and I don't want to get out of bed, as we all have that moment, it's a dead simple counter. I ask myself the question, what are you fucking here for? It's to get out of bed and do some good work, crack on. It's not more complicated than that for me. So I have these things that I can that I can lean on, that enable me to just be pragmatic, stay optimistic, keep moving forwards. And as long as my intentions are right around my actions, I can live with that. I can be at peace with it, and I can be motivated by it.
That is pretty much exactly the message that I give people in a work capacity. If I'm teaching, coaching, or mentoring personal trainers, one of the most important things I try to teach them is the difference between methods and principles. And I'll say, like, everything I deliver with a client, or the process that I was explaining to you before we started recording about my little hidden £1 million ideas, like, they're all stolen and borrowed from loads of other sources that I deem to be credible. And I kind of, but if all I do is take someone else's methods of training and I copy it, that's fine to a certain degree. I'm taking their what, but I don't understand why and how. So if all I do is take someone else's meaning of life, and I take someone else's ambition, and I try and insert it into my life like a fucking square peg in a round hole, it's not going to go. What I need to do is I need to take everyone else's methods, then start to learn and understand why they do it in that way, how it can be progressed or regressed in terms of difficulty, or how it can be adapted to a different person in a different environment. And from all of that, then I develop my own principles of operating, because every single thing I do, I now understand why I'm doing it and how I can tweak it and how I can adapt it to any situation. And then I'm on to a winner. I've borrowed other people's methods and I've turned them into my principles by understanding how and why, and not just doing what someone else is doing. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And I suppose in a similar way, when I started my first business, I read a book. W. Clement Stone had built an insurance company, and ironically, a quote in that, it's don't look for the next best thing, find out what you're passionate about and build it around that. The foundation has to be right, doesn't it? Your principles, what you're built of, and what your foundation. You need to understand yourself, and then how that works if in a business world. You need to understand yourself properly, be honest with yourself about who you are, what you are. Don't get swayed by what the next best big thing is, or whatever it might be. Go right back to basics, understand who you are, then translate that into, from a business perspective, are you going to be passionate around what you're about to do? Because if those things aren't rare in the difficult times, you're just going to give up. You're just going to give up. So the principles around your approach are essential, not just, like you say, cherry picking from everybody else. And that's why when I just delivered my kind of, what's the meaning of life and my operating system, it's because I can buy into the integrity that it stands for, the unconditional approach. Everything about it resonates with me. It wasn't just that I took a quote that somebody else thought was good. I took the quote, but I felt it, and I went, yes, I can live by that. And that's, I think, sort of maybe a bit of a deeper level than the practicality of delivering something. But from a deeper level, it's all the same. It's the foundations of everything have to be solid.
Absolutely. And that, a few of the things that you said there resonate perfectly with the Ant Middleton quote that I referenced earlier. But be honest with yourself, it sets you free as a person. And like that, the more I hear it and the more I say it to myself, the more it applies, the more things that it applies to, and the more value it holds.
Well, the thing is it's a protective thing for us to lie to ourselves, isn't it? If the truth is painful, we'll tell our inner monologue, and our subconscious will tell us to stay away from that. So we are not, as a way we're we're not built to embrace pain, suffering, whether that's physical or emotional. So if we know that we're acting a way that isn't conducive to being the right thing for us to do, we don't really want to focus on that, because we know that if we focus on that, we have to be honest with ourselves, and then and it'll give you a level of discomfort. You want to continue to do the things that don't give you discomfort. But actually, the best thing, and you know, Ant Middleton, love him or hate him, the truth is his ethos around being honest with yourself, and that is being truly honest with yourself, not almost honest with yourself, because that's easy to do that, you know. Be absolutely honest with yourself. That's actually not easy.
I can't go on like the 5-2 truth diet where I'm true to myself Monday to Friday, but at the weekend I just go on a massive bender.
And you know what, the analogy is, it really is, you're absolutely bang on, because all you're doing ultimately, if you're lying to yourself, is you're prolonging you tripping up at some point in the future. Yeah. That's it. You're masking over the reality. And I'm one for lancing the boil, you know, eat that frog, deal with the biggest problem there and then, do it now, don't hang about it, don't procrastinate. However difficult that is, deal with it, because you'll be better in the long run for it.
And every minute after lancing that boil or eating the frog, you can't get it back. So why not experience that minute without those hidden burdens and fucking enjoy them a bit more? Yeah.
Mate, this is it. But I mean, look, we all have weaker times and stronger times, don't we? There are times when we are willing to be honest with ourselves, and there's other times when we just want to go, do you know what, I'm going to leave that for a bit. And that's okay as well, I think. To an element, if it's too difficult to get there and it's too challenging, just being aware that you're going to have to go there at some point is also okay. You know what I mean? And I know that sounds almost contradictory to what I just said around eat that frog, get it done. But there is a reality to it, which means we have to have the capacity sometimes to be able to deal with some challenging things. And I think being aware of that and the right time when you've built the capacity or you've built the right framework around you to actually really be honest, then that's okay. So people shouldn't point making is people shouldn't be getting down on themselves if they know they've got something they need to deal with, but they haven't had the confidence and the bravery to do that yet. That's a different. You're being honest with yourself about the fact that you haven't got the bravery yet. That's the truth. That's the important part.
Which paradoxically is starting to solve the problem without having to actually shout it out loud. It's the first step in the right direction.
Correct. Yeah.
Last question. In the words of Frank Sinatra, regrets. I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. Any regrets? Or I should say,
no.
What do you regret?
Yeah. Okay. So the first problem with the question is the word regret, because of what it. Regret is an interesting question in itself, as in the word is an interesting word. It means
it's very negative.
Yeah,
it has a very negative connotation, doesn't it?
And but I do think that if I struggle to say I would regret, but I'm happy to almost have the conversation around would I made different decisions at the time almost. There are certain times when. I can't regret. I can't go as far as that. That's the reality. I think I wished I'd have been able to have a conversation with my parents earlier in my life about the past. I think that would have been helpful to me and them. And there still an elephant in the corner in our household. So I think the longer it goes, it's almost been a bit more difficult to almost talk about it to some degree. So I think there's still time for that. And interestingly, my last answer around when you're brave enough, you need to do something, but you've got to wait for the capacity to be brave enough. That's what I was thinking of when I said that. I still think, being very candid, I still think there's a conversation that me and my parents need to have about the past. But
on that parent note, because I've had this question that I wanted to ask you at the end as well about both parenthood, with you being a dad now of what, a 7-year-old, and then obviously with the right. What was my question? My question is something like this, and I do have a habit for maybe talking for like 3 minutes and not even asking a question, but my question would be something like let's say, so when your parents found out about this, were you forced to tell them because of the media attention that was about to erupt, or did you tell them that before and then the media attention was the follow-on?
Yeah, so it was, once I joined the investigation after Andy Woodward conversation, it was evident and then particularly when I went on, and I knew I was on SAS, I then knew I needed to say to them that it's almost a bit like I've never actually had a frank conversation about it. It's like it's obvious now, almost thing. So we get it, and it's a bit like that. So there's never actually been a conversation. And I think the important thing for me is, for me to go back to that time and ask the questions I want to ask, because naturally, as you look back and you go, why was I put in that position? Why didn't you see what was going on? Why? It was obvious, all those questions. The reality is the way that I look at the past now, I almost don't need to ask those questions anymore. I kind of go, it's like, let's just look forwards. I forgive you if I have to forgive you. Let's just move forwards, and I'll just let that go. I've got, you know what I mean? I don't want to go back into that. I'm just not sure whether they need me to. So it's an interesting sort of situation. As far as I am as a father now, naturally I'm vigilant. There's no doubt it affects. You have to learn what is okay and what isn't okay. I can't really explain it in short, but it's like you feel awkward sometimes as a dad. Your son sits on your lap. That to other people is just a wonderful moment. Your son wants to come and give you a hug and sit on your lap. He's 2.5 years of age. I mean, what a wonderful thing that is. My experiences made me feel ridiculously uncomfortable. Is this okay? Do I need to sit next to him so he's not sitting on my lap? All of those things happen. Are people looking at me and going, oh, what's going on here? So my own son, right? So there's those things happen a lot. And it's things that I didn't envisage I was going to have to deal with. Now, here's the thing. Other dads who don't have my experience might also feel that way. So it might not be isolated to me and my past, but the truth is I don't know the difference. So I'm just wondering if I feel like that because of that, and I might not be. And that's part of the confusion it creates, So there's all of that. But the truth is James is now 7. He's in a football team. I'm managing his football team. I can't tell you the level of anxiety I have around that I never thought I would have. And it's because I want to protect those kids like you wouldn't believe. I can't tell you how much I don't want them to feel under pressure, unsafe, just fearful, panic. And I feel so responsible for that. Again, I had no idea that this was going to invoke this. And I'm talking to a point where it's really quite debilitating on a morning of a match.
Yeah,
I feel so full of anxiety. But these are the things I didn't think were going to be repercussions of my past. And again, other people might feel exactly the same that don't have my past. But I think the way I feel about these matches on a Saturday is not what most managers feel like.
I can imagine all of those things. Like as you're talking there, I have I've got 2 daughters, one 18 months and just turned 3, and I'll have, like, even when I put Molly to bed, if I do anything, leave the house or leave the room, she will demand a kiss and a hug, and I'll give her a big kiss on the lips, and like you say, it's like the most normal thing ever. But then in the back of my mind, I think, bloody hell, like, is there an element that if you do this in public, someone might think that's a bit weird, like, oh, you're kissing a baby, like, or something like that, which shouldn't carry any negative connotation, but it's that as somebody who never suffered any abuse at all in any way, shape or form, being like, I don't know, just being a perfectly normal, whatever that is, situation. I do a little, oh, is that a bit weird? I'm hugging, oh, I just touched her bum. Oh my God, like, that's like, what if the neighbour saw that? They might fucking put me on a register.
And I think importantly, increasing the awareness of abuse is really essential. The side effect of that, to a degree, is that people are more aware of it, and therefore your normal behaviour, you're questioning your normal behaviour. And I think that's a natural side effect to being more aware and more vigilant around safeguarding of children. But I would much prefer that to be for adults and parents to be more aware of safeguarding, and if the side effect is to be more aware of how they are with their children, well, I would prefer that than being blinkered to the reality of the world and then just carrying on as normal, whatever you say normal is. So it's a difficult side effect, and the important thing is, as I say, is my experience with James is my experience, but I didn't know if my strong emotions, one way or another, are normal, if you want to call them that, or if they're a result of just bringing the past still there, affecting my present, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
but,
they sound perfectly normal, because I can resonate with all of them. Knowing what I know, or knowing what little that I know about your situation, I can't fathom how much they must be amplified to the point where, again, you go round that they become debilitating again, like that sort of never-ending fucking vicious circle of questioning yourself, like, or just sort of challenging yourself, or just things that you probably shouldn't even give a second thought.
That's right.
Derailing your mind for hours.
And you have triggers. You talk to people about the triggers, you know, brown buns, you know, like brown bread buns, or whatever, baps, or whatever you want to call them. That's a trigger for me. So if I walk down the aisle and I see brown, because that's what we would have at lunch when we would stay with Barry. So, and if you were the one that was the bottom of the pile for that day, you're the one that's making sandwiches for everybody else. So the strong connotation to that moment, and it's just a bread bun, right? It's just sitting on the shelves in Tesco's. But it would transport me right back to that moment, and I can see it now in the kitchen, exactly where I was. He had a kitchen down. It was like open plan, bang, right in there, making the sandwich for everybody else. These are the things that aren't normal. They're the things that you shouldn't have to, as an adult person, look at something that's an inanimate object and have so much attached to it. But it's just the reality. The important thing now is I recognize it, but I don't have the emotion attached to it. That's the important thing now. For years and years, I'd see it, I'd log it consciously, but then the emotion it would invoke was negative. Nowadays, I just see it and I walk past it. So that is my indicator that I'm detaching the negative feelings of the past to the present and the future. And that's confidence building. Gives me a sense of comfort, you know.
Which is in stark contrast to when we were talking about music at the start of the show, and how the power of just a song, it's just a Diana Ross song, or it's just an Oasis song, but that song isn't just a song. Just like that bread roll wasn't just a bread roll, it's got a story. It takes you back to a different moment in time, a different place in time, and all of the feelings and emotions that you were experiencing at that time can come flooding back. But negatively, you've learned to untangle the shitty bread roll connotations and can focus on listening to Wonderwall, walking across a muddy field to my mate's house, or the positive on Magaluf balcony with Bob Marley playing and having that, only allowing the good stuff in, or a majority of the good stuff, because I'm sure the bad bits still sneak in now and then. It's a
and the important thing is
curve.
I accept them for what they are. I don't associate the emotion to it. I don't give it the time. I'm able to, and that isn't something you can easily do. As I say, I'll keep saying it. For me, my experience was professional help over a period of time, and then my ability to now interpret the past how I want to. But I'm still working on that all the time. I'm still working on how I interpret the past.
Mate, I think I need to sit down after this. My poor little brain is in overdrive. Last little bit, I ask you to write a letter. So I ask every guest to write a letter that they read out. It doesn't matter how long or short it is. The letter can be to anyone, dead or alive, including themselves, and it can be written in the past, present, or future. I've got no idea what to expect. But do you have a letter for me?
I have a letter. This was an interesting one for me because I could have easily written a letter to myself. I thought about writing a letter to myself when I was right in the middle of it, you know, telling myself how strong you're being and this and all. And I was like, yeah, I could do that. But then I thought, you know what? I've never addressed Barry. I've never actually addressed him. I've considered in the past going to prison and going and seeing him, asking a request to talk to him. I don't know, it's a bit of a Stockholm thing or whatever you call it, Stockholm. I don't know, but then I didn't do that. I never had a real forceful sort of compellingness to go and see him, but I wanted it throughout the period of the last however many years. I wanted to ask all the questions that you'd imagine. Why did you do this to me? And then actually I thought, you know what, I'm going to write him a letter because I see it differently now. And so I've written my letter to him. So it says, "Dear Barry, it is with great joy and pride that I write this letter full of positivity and optimism. I stand here today as a proud father, successful businessman, and a good friend to many. Despite your attempt to ruin my life for your own selfish gain, I stand here excited about my future, but more fulfillingly, I love my past." Yes, I just said that. I love my past. Yes, you ruined what should have been the best years of my life. Your twisted actions caused immeasurable damage to hundreds of innocent boys and their families, and will continue to do so, but not mine. Yes, it took years for me to tell my truth to the world, but wow, did this open the world up to me in a different way. The joys of life slowly started to present themselves in a way maybe I would never have seen without my difficult past. My protective disposition has ensured that the closest to me, and even those who aren't, I have their back. I've had the honor of being best man for 3 of my friends. I've been groomsman a number of times. Why is this? Because I lived a lie. A secret I kept for 25 years was in part the reason I had to be honest about everything else. You see, my past molded a person full of integrity, and no matter what, I will stand shoulder to shoulder with anyone who needs my support. This in part is due to your sinister actions and their repercussions. Isn't it amazing how resilient we can be, how agile and flexible the human being is? In the darkest and most difficult times, we find a way to survive and even thrive. You now sit in your jail cell, where you will die one day. I say this without any joy or sadness, but your existence has zero effect on my life. I don't pity you. I don't feel sad for you. I don't care about you, but I don't hate you. You're a part of my life that I choose to leave where it is. If you hadn't been in my life, I wouldn't be the person I am today. These times I feel, the times I feel the ball of fear sit in the pit of my stomach doesn't faze me. I learned to live with that fear a long time ago, thanks to you. My ability to pick up on subtle changes in people's emotions and react accordingly is thanks to you. The person I am today, the person who can be proud of their life and who sees only optimism in the future, wouldn't be a person if you hadn't played that part. Ultimately, you tried to destroy me, and indirectly those closest to me, but it hasn't prevailed. Isn't it amazing that quite the opposite has happened? My goal now is to help others. I feel strong enough to lead the difficult conversation about childhood sexual abuse and childhood trauma. I want to use my strength to show others who aren't there yet that they too can live, not just exist. They too can speak their truth and love their fate. They can, with the right help, rip the negative out of the past and carry forward the positives. So, to the monster who once lived amongst us, who now sits caged up contemplating your existence every minute and every day, I want to say that you didn't succeed in the end. Your survivors walk freely, experiencing the joys that life brings, something that you'll never do again. Now I'm off to enjoy every second of the rest of my life. Jamie Cartwright, 43-year-old survivor of childhood sexual abuse.
Mate, I don't know what to say. When we first spoke on the phone, I didn't even want to say his name because and I was sort of almost anticipating me having to sort of, when I share this show, sort of putting it in a side note, this is the case that's referred to or something, so people have got some frame of reference. Because I assumed that the mention of his name wouldn't be an avenue sort of that you'd want to go down. I was trying to tread very carefully with that. Then obviously a few minutes into the show, or wasn't a few minutes at all, it's probably about an hour in by the time we got to the first question, where you mentioned his name in the context that you did, sort of like at least gave me sort of like it made me a bit more comfortable that you were comfortable saying his name, but never in a million years would I have anticipated that the letter would have been written as it was, like to, I don't know, to touching on all those things that I sort of, those buttons I pressed when you mentioned Mandela and what he had been through, and when I then sort of cheaply sort of asked about revenge that people want on their abusers or people who have done them wrong in any capacity, and I was kind of I was inquisitive to know, but I was sort of, I asked in trepidation because I almost didn't want to hear the answer. But then to hear you pour that out, which I mean in a complimentary way, but to hear you talk about it like that, in that sense, with no anger, only almost like a complimentary sort of thank you for making me what I am today, and you have to go round in circles forever being what you are, therefore I win. Like you tried to win, but I've won the match, as it were. Like that was very, very difficult to listen to, especially to listen to and not cry my fucking eyes out. I dread to think what it was like for you.
No, and I think the important thing, I wouldn't be human if it didn't invoke emotion as I read it. But the important thing is, it wouldn't have been that long ago I wouldn't have been able to read it because of what emotion it would have invoked. So the important thing is, for me, is I am definitely leveraging my past for my present and my future in my, to the benefit of me. And you know, there's almost a thank you to you for asking me to be on here, but also I never thought for a second when you asked me to write a letter that's what it would end up looking like. I hadn't got, you know, so this is a moment in time for me, right? I've written that letter, and again, I rewrote some of the sentences in that letter because I wasn't being honest with myself when I wrote them. Because again, I wanted to protect myself. And actually the reality is, no, the reality is that, and that's what I'm going to say it. And I had to keep rewriting it. So it was a process. It was quite a profound process for me. Also, it doesn't, you know, people talk about bring closure, right? You have milestones along this healing process. This is definitely something that is really, it was a really interesting thing for me to do that. So I appreciate you asking me, because how far I've come. If I showed you that to my therapist now, having known, she knows me more than anyone. She's seen that journey I've been through. If I showed her that now, I think she'd be really proud of me.
Mate, 100%. You never know. Hopefully, if you send her the link, I might pick up an extra listener. I might.
Yeah,
I'll be up into double figures.
Shameless requirement. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, shameless plug. Yeah. No, mate. So yeah, I really appreciate you asking me that question, because actually, you said it when we originally spoke about this. You said, mate, listen, we'll have a chat. Who knows what's going to come up? And that is one of those moments. That's one of those moments for me that I didn't think I'd have or need, and actually really helpful. And I'll now keep that and save that, because I think other people that I speak to, that gives them an indication about how they can view their past.
Yeah.
You know, so
100% on this section of the podcast that I think, to the best of my knowledge, is quite unique. I've listened to thousands of hours of podcasts over the years, and I haven't heard somebody do it. That's not to say that there isn't a podcast somewhere in the world where it doesn't happen, because I'm sure there is. I only listen to probably a handful, hundreds of times each. So I've got I'm fishing in a fairly small pond, as it were. But it is relatively. It was a unique idea that I had with this sort of fascination of, I mean, the whole podcast was accelerated in the last sort of 12 months. My sister's husband passed away, died of COVID, 31, had 6-year-old son, 12-year-old stepson, 13-year-old stepson, or what have you, and that obviously, it didn't tear apart our family, but it tore apart her family, literally. But it was a massive. All of a sudden, it was very, very close to home. When you stuff in the news and like watching Andy on ITV, go, oh, this is interesting. Fucking hell, that's a terrible story. But then I can draw a line and let's go about our daily, because that's not my life. It's not our lives. And so losing Jamie when we did was like a massive step for me to sort of reflect on dying, like my own mortality, something that in my 20s, like I'm invincible, I'm going to live forever. Then having my own children and being scared shitless if I get a headache because maybe I've got fucking brain cancer and I'm going to be dead by Christmas. Like all of a sudden, like, I'd gone from being immortal to like a fucking, not a nervous wreck, but just very, very aware of my own mortality and how insignificant I am, how precious time is with the right people, and that's where I sort of then formulated the show as it is, and the letter is in there as a as part, just out of my own interest, my own nosiness of if you were on your deathbed and you could say something to someone at some point, what would it be? Like, don't you get hit by a bus and leave that thing unsaid. Say it. And I want to hear you say it, because that might help me to do the same. And and the more people I hear going through that experiment, the diversity and the range of responses that I get, and then the knock-on effect from that, without this being completely selfish and all about me and what I enjoy from the show, there will be other people that will listen. Hopefully more and more. If you're listening to this, tell someone about it. But there'll be more and more people who start to resonate with some of the things that are discussed, and not everybody was abused when they were a child. Not everybody has broken their back in a rugby match. Not everybody has been through any of the different types of trauma that the guests have been through. But too many people, I think, will sit hidden inside their own head, telling themselves lies about stuff, or they will not have a clue how to begin to answer any of the four questions that I've asked you. And it worries me that might mean that they're going through life with their shoelaces tied together. And what if someone could just fucking undo their laces and allow them to tap into a little bit more of their potential and see what fucking happens. And
I think the important thing in that is, and this is again, difficult times. There are some really positive shit that comes out of difficult times. And the important thing is sometimes you have to have a difficult time to see them. But the important thing is sometimes you don't. And if someone can tell you and teach you them, and you can start adopting techniques, approaches, mindsets, because someone else has lived it. You don't have to have lived it to be able to take the benefit from it. So it works on multiple levels. It helps the most darkest moments of people in their life right then. But it also can help somebody who just takes one little snippet, who has had no trauma in their life, but goes, you know what? I can think about that differently. I can act differently there, and it can have a knock-on effect, right? And that's the beauty of having conversations and having calculated questions to invoke a proper response.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. And if it means that I've accidentally sort of stumbled upon a formula that helps some people with some things, then absolutely brilliant. But I've kept you for far too long, and I not only do I appreciate your time, but I always thank people for humouring me, but you've taken that to another level with the depth of the insight and the I don't know, just every way that you've kind of expressed yourself in with regards to a situation that we wouldn't wish on our worst enemies, but sadly some of our best friends have probably been through without us even knowing. And so to give such a candid perspective on it is very interesting, but hopefully also helpful to others. But so mate, I thank you very much, and I'm just going to go and blow my nose and dry my eyes when I'm off air, and
but when you do that, shake yourself down and realize that every second you're dying. So don't dwell on that. See it for what it is. Take the positives from it. Step forward into whatever you're going to do for the rest of your day and make a difference for yourself and for others. Because you do that because that's what we're here to do. And just keep forging forwards. That's the important thing.
Perfect, mate. And that's your mic drop moment. And thank you very much. And I'll see you soon for a much needed beer. Although we'll probably sit down, have a glass of water. Now we're old and grumpy bastards.
Yeah, we'll have a chip of tea though.
I'll have to also say, like, the serious nature of this 3-hour conversation is not to be looked down upon. But throughout the whole thing, I can't decide whether you look more like Ricky Gervais or Cesc Fabregas.
Right. That's staying out of it. One of my mates calls me Ricky Gervais. It screws my head up. Yeah, mate, I've had that.
So mate, you keep sitting and stroking your beard, and it's
do you know what? It's because I need a shave. That's why I realised I need a shave. Thankfully, this is just audio in it, so we're all right, aren't we?
I will stick it on YouTube as well, so there will be people will be able to join me. Maybe I can set up a poll. I mean, more Ricky Gervais or more Cesc Fabregas. Either way, you're onto a winner because they're both good blokes.
Oh mate, oh dear. Well, and on that bombshell, let's. I've heard you say this on the end of a couple of your podcasts. I need a wee, so it's time to go in it. Time to go.
I've already had 2.
That's hilarious,
mate. I'll speak to you very soon. Cheers, 100%. Jamie. Bye bye.
Take it easy, mate. Bye bye.